It is 7 o'clock, studio. We will begin in 1 minute. Okay. The April 8th, 2021 regular meeting of the Fairfax County School Board will now come to order. We will now take roll. Ms. Cohen. And have a mic check as well. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Good evening, everybody.
Ms. Darnat-Koufax.
Good evening.
Mr. Frisch.
Hello.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Smarin.
Hello.
Ms. Omesh.
Hello.
Ms. Pekarsky.
Good evening, everyone.
Ms. Eismore-Heiser. Ms. Tolan.
Good evening.
Mr. Anabudo. Ms. Cohen.
Good evening.
Was that Ms. Cohen? I'm so sorry. Oh, you're right here next to me. Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Eismore-Heiser.
I'm here.
And Mr. Anabudo, are you with us?
Hello.
Hello, good to have you.
Good evening.
We will check in on our 2 remaining board members in a little while. Please rise as Student Representative Nathan Anabudo leads us in reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Please be seated. In order to comply with Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary for the Board to certify that since the Fairfax County School Board convened a closed meeting on April 8, 2021, and to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board during the closed session. Moved by Ms. Corbett-Sanders, seconded by Ms. Cohen. All in favor? Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Pekarsky, Ms. Eismore-Heiser, Ms. Marin, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Darnat-Koufax, Ms. Tolan, and Ms. McLaughlin. Thank you. And checking to see online. I apologize, I don't have all of my screens today. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, are you in agreement? Checking for your
Yes.
hand.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear you. Thank you.
Okay. My hand is raised, so I'm not sure if you can see that.
Now I
Okay.
can see it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. If you would like to review a copy of the agenda and any agenda item that is being discussed tonight, that information may be found at the back of the auditorium or on the website at fcps.edu/schoolboard /board docs. Struggling tonight. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast on Channel 99 and live streamed on the website at fcps.edu/tv/ch99. Item 5.01, minutes, has been removed from tonight's agenda. With us tonight is our newest addition to our school board office, Maggie Hamadi. Please welcome Maggie. Welcome. We're very excited that you are here with us. I'll now call on Ms. Aranabudo for a few announcements.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. National Volunteer Week is April 8th through the 24th. The theme for the 2021 National Volunteer Week is Celebrate Service, an opportunity to shine a light on the people and causes that inspire us to serve. Volunteerism empowers individuals to find their purpose, to take their passion and turn it into meaningful change. When each of us, in our own way, answers the call to make a difference, we make progress in solving our most persistent problems and create stronger communities and a more just society. Over this past year, volunteers played a vital role in FCPS during the pandemic. We are so proud to have compassionate, caring, and dedicated volunteers who supported our students and schools as we navigated new and ever-changing situations with COVID-19. The partnerships and support this past year were beyond measure. Whether online, at our schools, or at our few distribution locations, doing good comes in many forms, and we recognize and celebrate them all. Today, we celebrate our volunteers in FCPS during National Volunteer Week and every day this year. Thank you, volunteers. Dr. Anderson, that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Aranabudo. And I'll call on Mrs. Corbett Sanders for the recognition.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. I'm so pleased to be able to offer this recognition of the Month of the Military Child. These students and their families are a major part of the FCPS community and in the Mount Vernon Magisterial District because of its home of Fort Belvoir, one of the largest military installations in the country. So April is the Month of the Military Child. This year's theme is Military Children and Youth, a resilient force in a changing world. It is a time to recognize our military and veteran-connected students for their service and sacrifice. Military kids sacrifice and serve our country in their own way. Here in Fairfax County, we are extremely fortunate to have over 11,000 students who are part of a military family, as well as part of our Fairfax County Public Schools family. Our military-connected students bring a strong sense of community and a wealth of life experiences to our schools. They are resourceful and adaptable while living with numerous challenges presented by frequent moves, parental deployments, and a host of life transitions that often include reintegration and dealing with profoundly changed parents. The following are just a few of the challenges military children face. Moving and starting over on an average of every 1 to 3 years. Attending 6 to 9 different schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. And multiple deployments of a parent. Throughout all of this, military children are resilient and patriotic. They know firsthand what it feels like to be the new kid, so they are usually the first one to welcome a new student to a school. Celebrating the Month of the Military Child provides a powerful opportunity to raise awareness and build support to help these children meet the unique challenges they face. It's an opportunity to recognize and thank military children and youth for their heroism, character, courage, sacrifices, and continued resilience. We invite you to join us on April 21st for Purple Up Day, as we encourage everyone to wear purple to celebrate our military-connected students. And as a bit off script, this year we will be celebrating the 10th year of the Month of the Military Child. And so it's more important than ever to wear purple. So with that, I would like to invite Colonel Seagraves to say a few words. He is the garrison commander of Fort Belvoir.
Great, thank you, Ms. Corbett Sanders. You guys have good audio?
Yes, we're able to hear you.
Okay, great. We'll try the video and see if that works too. Ms. Corbett Sanders and Dr. Anderson, thank you for allowing us, really as a military community, but me as the commander, the opportunity just to recognize our military children, but also the school board, really, in Fairfax County and all of the schools for their continued support of military students throughout the year. And really just a special thank you for recognizing our children during April, the month of the military child. I'd also like to thank Ms. Albers, our LNO at Fort Belvoir, our liaison officer, and our principals, Ms. Pareja and Ms. Chianetta. They're just great partners along with the Fairfax County schools. So, Ms. Corbett Sanders, as you talked about, Virginia is the state with the largest number of military connected students, including more than 11,000 in Fairfax County. And one of the many jewels of Fort Belvoir is our elementary campus, which has about 600 students enrolled preschool through second grade, and then another 600 from grades 3 through 6. We're very proud of our Dolphins and thoroughly enjoy the relationship we have with the students, staff, and administration, as well as our families that participate and attend those schools. Students of all ages and grades and their families represent the strongest of our military family and prove time and time again their resilience and fortitude and sense of community. Military children make soldiers stronger through their support, patriotism, love, and adaptability. We're certainly stronger as an Army and as a military because we have the support from our families and military children. The fact that local governments recognize the unique circumstances in military children's lives let us all know how important they are to our duties and, most importantly, to our collective future. We greatly appreciate you being in tune with the military children's frequent relocations, parent deployments, and what seems like sometimes constant change, the need for flexibility and other stresses of military life. An integral part, obviously, of these kids' development is the world-class education opportunities that exist, especially here in Fairfax County. We know the partnership between Fort Belvoir and the schools prepares them for success both in education and as future leaders. We continue to address the evolving needs of our larger family to ensure they are healthy, self-reliant, and ready for anything. This applies not only to soldiers, but also to military children. I also want to thank, again, the Fairfax County Public Schools for your additional support to our military committee and for their continued efforts of the staff and administrators in the entire school district for our military students and their families. We greatly appreciate that, and we certainly appreciate the long-standing partnership that we have with Fairfax County Public Schools and your ongoing advocacy for military children as they take their educational journeys. And finally, I'd just like to say once again, thank you for recognizing military children with this proclamation. Your public support of our family really does mean the world to us. And just another plug for the Fort Belvoir Elementary School. So I got to do a welcome back a couple of weeks ago, and the staff, just the professionalism and the way that they interact with the parents and the students, mostly now during a pandemic, is more important than ever, and they just did an absolutely phenomenal job. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board tonight.
Thank you, Colonel, for those wonderful remarks. We appreciate that you were able to join us this evening. Our next agenda item is 2.06, National Library Week and School Library Month recognition. I call on Mr. Frisch.
Thank you. The National Library Week and School Library Month, April 2021. National Library Week is April 4th through the 10th, and April is School Library Month, the American Association of School Librarians' celebration of school librarians and their programs. Strong school library programs play an essential role in a student's educational career. FCPS school librarians have made tremendous contributions to students and staff this past year during the pandemic. FCPS librarians sprang into action, ensuring students had access to books when buildings closed. Whether through curbside checkout, mobile checkout locations in neighborhoods, buses turned into bookmobiles, or by personally delivering books directly to students at home, librarians kept families reading. Librarians partnered with transportation and food services employees to manage the process and ensure everyone was safe. This year, 4.2 million FCPS library books have been checked out. Students have also used more than 530,000 digital books. Library online resources have been essential to student learning in the virtual environment. Librarians shared these centrally purchased research databases and ebook platforms with teachers and families to support learning, and a record 10.5 million searches have been taken place on FCPS library online resources this year. The greatest assets for school library programs are the librarians themselves. They provide instruction on information literacy skills and digital citizenship, co-plan and co-teach with teachers through an inquiry-based approach to learning, develop maker activities, host book clubs, and much, much more. Most importantly, they provide an environment for students to be themselves, pursue their interests, and know that they belong. The school board welcomes this opportunity to commend Fairfax County Public Schools librarians and to express its gratitude for their dedication to our students, their commitment to equity, and their wide-ranging services they provide to the school system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frisch. Item 3.01, citizen participation. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 3 minutes. The school board will not hear statements involving issues that have been scheduled for public hearings, such as capital improvement program, budget, and boundaries. Speakers should only address new business, action items, or resolutions as listed on the meeting agenda. Complaints regarding individual students or school-based employees should be directed to the appropriate school principal or other school official. Speakers should refrain from using personally identifiable information in connection with an individual student and are expected to deliver their comments with the decorum and respect appropriate to the conduct of the public's business. In-person speakers should wear a mask, stand behind the black line on the floor, and speak into the microphone. Thank you for your cooperation, and thanks to those who have come to speak to us today. Tonight, we have 10 citizens who've signed up to address the board and also 5 video testimonies. I will now turn this over to the clerk to call our speakers.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Samir Chowdhury.
Good evening. My name is Samir Chaudhary, and I'm a senior at McLean High School. Recently, I was fortunate enough to be admitted into multiple top universities, and yet, throughout the year, I've struggled to pass several classes. However, this isn't an isolated incident, nor is it a narrative about unmotivated students performing poorly. Across the board, from middle schoolers to high school seniors, we see accomplished, driven, and intelligent students facing the profound difficulties imposed by COVID-19. According to the Washington Post, FCPS reported that the percentage of students who earned Fs in at least 2 classes jumped to 11%. So why is that? The answer is that simply switching our classes to Blackboard Collaborate is not sufficient nor equitable education strategy in the midst of a global pandemic. We have certainly been equal in providing students laptops, but were we equitable? Did we increase support to communities who may face language barriers or have working families? The answer is no. Furthermore, we have not mandated training resources for teachers to discern mental health issues within their own classrooms. We have not successfully nor consistently implemented an engaging social and emotional or SEL curriculum, and we have not accounted for the diverse experiences across FCPS in our current SEL curriculum. Yes, we have reformed the grading policy to alleviate some student stress, but the fact of the matter is that this is a mere Band-Aid on an increasingly prevalent mental health crisis. And what do we know about Band-Aids? They inevitably come off. For the past few weeks, over 40 students across 15 high schools in our county have mobilized to organize around the mental health crisis in FCPS. We've produced 3 extensive proposals regarding telemental health, student-led initiatives, and a revised SEL curriculum, which we plan on lobbying to all of you in the near future. Today, I wanted to hone in on one of the core facets of our revised SEL curriculum, embracing diversity. The current FCPS approach is problematic because it emphasizes pro-social behaviors, including kindness, sharing, and empathy, but does not account for students' experiences with racism or even homophobia, which are factors that clearly impede on pro-social behaviors. Oftentimes, external aspects such as a volatile home life or living in poverty yield devastating implications on student mental health. With over 29% of our student population economically disadvantaged, more than 27% of students being English learners, and well over 60% of students being people of color, it is imperative that we account for the vastly different life experiences, such as extreme trauma, that these populations face throughout life. All of these groups and these experiences must be addressed in an SEL, and our status quo, on the other hand, is merely a one-size-fits-all approach. As the school board, it is your duty to serve your citizens. Diversity may be the hardest thing for society to live with, but it is also the most dangerous thing for society to be without. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Astrid Maslin.
Good evening, members of the school board and Dr. Brabrand. My name is Astrid Maslin, and I am an 8th grade student at Frost Middle School. At the moment, I am in hybrid. I'm pleased to be speaking about opening schools, as the board will be awarding the Frost renovation contract this evening. At the moment, I am in the hybrid learning environment. However, my wish is to be back in the school building for 5 days a week in-person learning this spring and definitely next fall. Every student in this county, from kindergarten to 12th grade, needs to have the option of being in a school building with a teacher in front of the class. Why is 5 days a week of in-person learning so important? We need to be active both physically and mentally. These objectives are much more difficult to achieve via a computer screen. We have now lost a year of being motivated to be physically fit. Our minds and critical thinking skills are dulled by being in front of screens. We need to have social interaction with our peers. Socializing teaches us life skills like how to look at someone when you speak, how to make friends, how to solve problems in group settings. Being with our friends allows us to talk about our days, share good and bad times, listen and help those who may need a friend to lean on. Without those opportunities, many students feel isolated and alone. Some students feel like they don't even know how to be a friend anymore. As a student who will be transitioning to high school next year, I'm extremely concerned about others like me who are heading into a new school without much preparation for what lies ahead. Many of my peers, including myself, are taking high school courses which will count towards our GPA. Has the best educational foundation been laid for us this year? From kindergarten until 12th grade, we are expected to learn and grow so that the next year will be another building block in our education. During this past year, the foundation so carefully built started to crack. How many students will slip through these cracks? How many students will have the anxiety over the fact that they are falling behind their peers? Will we be able to recover mentally, physically, and academically? You, our elected leaders, have the power to start the repairs to our educational foundation. Open our schools for in-person learning 5 days a week now. Don't let any of the 188,000 students in your school district fall through those cracks due to lack of leadership. This week, we were told there was a possibility that many students will go back to 4 days a week. All students who have chosen in-person learning should already be back. It should be a reality, not a possibility. The mission of Fairfax County Public Schools states, Fairfax County Public Schools inspires and empowers students to meet high academic standards, lead healthy, ethical lives, and be responsible and innovative global citizens. As a student in your school district, it is my expectation that everyone who sits before me tonight will be a responsible and innovative leader. You can do this, and you must, for the health, welfare, and future success of every student. As I end my comments, I want to thank my principal, Mr. Harris, and all my teachers at Frost Middle School who are at school and teaching me in person. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before this board, and I hope my words will spur you to take immediate action on opening schools 5 days a week for in-person learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marcy Reeves.
I am here to speak as a military family, as a scientist with a PhD in molecular biology, and a mom. My husband has served in the military for nearly 20 years in the submarine force and is currently at the Pentagon. We have 3 kids, 3, 6, and 8. We moved to Fairfax County just in the summer of 2020. I want to highlight 2 things tonight. The choices that we make based on evidence at any one point can change. New evidence, new data, new choices require new innovative solutions. I could speak to you as a molecular biologist, but rather I choose to share our story. My kindergartner, including her pre-K years, has attended 3 different schools in 3 different states. My son, 4. Had the military not moved us, my kids would be in person 5 days a week since September. And as it stands, their school will be open in less than 2 weeks at 100% capacity. It breaks my heart that my kids see their friends, their peers in person while they sit behind a screen. They see their dad go to work each and every single day, including during the shutdown. Over the past school year, I have watched my kids' love of learning drain out of their eyes to be replaced with dark circles and tears. As a parent, I have not been given the choice for full-time opportunity. As a scientist, I had hope that the data, all kids could return in person. And yet, we watched as our friends, our peers returned around the world in person, and my kids sat behind a screen. The choice for my kids to attend school in person full-time continues to be delayed by Fairfax County Public Schools and those in this room. More and more delay. When my kindergartner finally did go to school, she leapt off the bus after that first day to tell me she had finally made a friend. In the same moment, I felt joy and heartbreak considering all of this lost time. The next day, when she got off the bus, she told me that her new friend gets to go 4 days. Why can't she? Her friend was given a choice. We were given more heartbreak and delay. My kids were interviewed for the morning news show, Being Military Children. When I asked if they wanted to participate, you know what my son said? I wonder if they'll do the interview in another part of the school. I've never seen the inside of the library. Does it even have a music room like my old school? As newcomers, we were not welcomed and invited into our new school to help us military families connect into our new community. Our military family and community and the schools within it are essential. And we need a choice to be in person full-time now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tom Goudreau.
Good evening. I recommend that the school board not approve the annual plan flow-through application for Part B funds presented today by Superintendent Braband. Please note of the presentation later tonight, this document serves as a formal agreement between the FCPS School Board and the Virginia Department of Education. The same report, approved last year by the school board, repeated the exact same policy statements and submission statements. Sadly, FCPS's action did not comply with the plan this past school year. Additional safeguards need to be added to this year's plan. This past year, FCPS did not provide special education students a free, appropriate public education. FCPS began the school year by predetermining reduced special education services, regardless of services needed. FCPS instructed special education teachers to propose new IEP goals that could be satisfied by the reduced services FCPS was willing to perform. They instructed FCPS IEP team members to present that reduced service plan as in line with FCPS special education services. When parents would not agree to the predetermined services, FCPS repeatedly, unilaterally implemented reduced service plans in a format inappropriate for students' IEP goals and needs without following due process. FCPS also repeatedly refused to offer contracted supplemental IEP support services where appropriate and available in Fairfax County. Even in-home support services were deemed unavailable except by virtual support. When confronted with a due process complaint, FCPS would argue in court that they should be allowed to de facto implement anything they want to due to COVID. That viewpoint renders meaningless the procedural safeguards in the Virginia Special Education regulations that a parent must consent to, quote, any revision of a child's IEP services, unquote. It is also in conflict with the Office of Special Education Programs guidance related to COVID-19 dated September 28, 2020. And it is also in conflict with last year's policy statements and submission statements, which were published by this school board after COVID closed the schools. FCPS special education is broken. The written assurances of last year did not assure FCPS compliance with IDEA. What assurance does this plan provide that parents will not be presented with another email stating that FCPS wants to further reduce special education services again? FCPS can't even return half of the students to 4 days a week in person learning this spring. FCPS special education students need more protection than the status quo. Yes, you should seek and obtain Part B federal funds, but the school board needs to ensure that FCPS does not simply write something that is compliant and then do whatever they want. Let me be clear, my issue is not with my IEP teachers, it's not with my special ed teachers, it's with the people that wrote this policy, instructed the staff to do it, and have not been accountable.
Our next speaker is Frankie Sellers.
Good evening, my name is Frankie and I'm a junior in FCPS. As a queer and transgender student, I'm here to talk to you about the school system's flawed approach to my mental health and the mental health of our other marginalized students. As a transgender student, I have always felt unsafe in the presence of school resource officers. I avoid interaction with them in fear that I may be verbally harassed, dead-named, or misgendered. I'm afraid of being targeted for being transgender, and I know if I were sent to a juvenile justice system, I would be treated unfairly, like so many other transgender youth. My story about how the school system does not treat people equally is not unique and is shared by thousands of marginalized FCPS students like me. The damaging impact of this discrimination is clear. It harms our academic performance, safety, and mental health. It's why the depression rates in the queer community at 50% are so high, statistics that are likely an undercount since they don't always include transgender students. Despite the damaging mental health impact of these systemic inequalities, the school system continues to talk about mental health only in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. To be clear, COVID has certainly impacted our mental health negatively, but it's not the only factor, and the school board can't continue to act like it is. Your actions to continue to allow the suicide crisis in the queer community to grow, ignore the religious minorities on the school calendar, allow SROs to remain in our buildings, and rescinded equity statements will only damage the mental health of marginalized students like me. You need to take action now, and especially need to address school resource officers, and you cannot keep avoiding those conversations. It's not just me. So many of my friends, especially friends who are queer and people of color, have talked about their damaging interactions with SROs. One talked about an SRO who placed his hands on his firearm the entire duration of what should have been a routine meeting with their counselor. One mentioned that SROs only serve as painful reminders of a racist system that doesn't treat them equally. And another student mentioned an SRO who wore a Blue Lives Matter mask, a symbol that directly harms students of color and makes them feel unsafe and targeted. SROs are not keeping our school system safe and are only terrorizing marginalized students. Instead of continuing to spend limited resources on a traumatic and racist system, let's invest in the mental health and wellness of marginalized communities. It's especially important because of the rise of transphobic and racist attacks that are happening across state legislatures in this country right now. There has never been a more important and pressing time to eliminate trauma and invest in the mental health of my community. You can do that by talking about mental health in non-COVID contexts, removing SROs, and investing in support for my community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vanessa Hall.
Hi, I went to Frost Middle School in the 1980s. Oddly, it didn't look much different than it does now. However, it was a very different place because of rampant bullying. I'm thrilled to see that it will be renovated soon, possibly while my own child is there. Simultaneously, I'm also pleased to see the changed Frost atmosphere to one of respect and kindness, which was attained through the concerted efforts of policies, administration, staff, students, and families. Speaking of respect and kindness, I recently read about anti-transgender organizations that are challenging the Virginia transgender student policies. As a parent and active volunteer in FCPS, I see this lawsuit as a direct attack on all of us, but especially on transgender students and their families. To me, trans students are kids, first and foremost. They are kids who wear clothes, have names, play sports, and love, laugh, and live in our communities. Why would someone want to force students into the wrong clothes, wrong bathroom, wrong names? Why would anti-trans groups want to restrict the daily function of these kids and make them targets? Most parents I know want policies that support trans students because we all recognize how hard it is to be a kid these days, and we want to support kids, particularly the most vulnerable ones. I say most vulnerable because anyone who looks at the health statistics for the transgender community knows that we need to do so much better to support people when they're young so that they can thrive and grow into healthy adults. For example, did you know that using a transgender youth's chosen name at work and school with friends and at home reduces depression symptoms by 71% and reduces suicide attempts by 65%? To clarify, these health statistics are not because these kids are trans, but because they are misgendered and bullied. Efforts to remove their agency over their body and names is harmful, if not deadly. I say all of this not just as a parent, but also as an educator, an active school, community, and church volunteer. I'm a Sunday school teacher and a church and scout leader. I'm also a certified youth mental health first aider and a certified OWL teacher. If you don't know what OWL is, it's Our Whole Lives, a renowned comprehensive sex and relationship education curriculum. I took these intensive courses in order to better support children and families in all of my communities. Kids at my church and in my schools know and trust me because I'm a safe adult. I listen to them, respect them, and will go to bat for them when needed, which is why I'm here now. To sum up, you can help make trans kids healthy and happy, or you can make trans kids miserable and isolated. Please ensure that we have a protective and supportive trans student policy enforced in our schools. Also, in my experience, your program is only as good as the guidance and training that supports it. Kids need support, but adults need guidance. Please don't skimp on the guidance that ensures that teachers and staff fully understand the critical nature of supporting and protecting transgender students. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rory Cooper.
Good evening. I would like to speak to the local special education annual that will be presented tonight. I would have been there in person, but I was coaching my son's baseball team. See, Little League resumed last fall. With a little thinking, children have been together since August, just not in school. In your presentation, there is no mention of the direct harm caused to students, especially those at risk or with learning and physical disabilities, caused by the decisions of this board and superintendent. Because of the actions of this board, little children in our community are suffering from anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and a tragic loss of self-esteem and learning. Moms and dads are leaving the workforce to do what our tax dollars are supposed to do, educate our children. My kindergartner first saw the inside of the school in March. His first directive, stay off the playground. I have to assume that the board still sprays its mail with Lysol. My kids will always struggle to keep up with their cousins and millions of families who have been safely in school since September. Big school systems that just figured it out. This board hasn't just put Fairfax County behind most of America where schools are open 5 days a week. It's put us on a different planet, a world that existed 12 months ago, but that most people have used science and public health guidance to move past rather than stubbornly sticking their heads in the ground. This board and its favored union demanded that teachers were first in line for vaccinations, before cancer patients, before disabled and vulnerable populations, before essential workers doing their jobs outside of their homes. And then after every teacher, administrator, and union leader got a shot, this board decided to revert to a hybrid model that was designed for the fall of 2020 before vaccines were available, a moral choice that I would struggle to live with. But teachers are vaccinated. The CDC says they cannot carry the virus. The 6-foot rule has been debunked, and yet we're clinging to it in cafeterias as one more excuse. Surface transmission is debunked. Nearly every epidemiologist, pediatrician, and psychologist in this country is begging school boards like you to open your eyes. Children are being unnecessarily harmed for life, not just a month or a year, but their lives because of the stubbornness of 13 people. Now you're doing it again. Brand announces we're going back 4 days, and then everyone receives an email from their principal a few hours later saying, sorry, Brand's cafeteria rules won't allow it. And that's ignoring your need for a lifetime 3-day weekend. We moved to this county for these schools, and like thousands of families, we're regretting that decision because of this board's indifference to the pain you've inflicted. Open the schools 5 days a week immediately, not next fall, which is a cowardly crutch, not next month, today. Science says we can. Experts and doctors say we must. 99% of parents in neighboring Falls Church City say parents want it, but 13 people keep saying no. You broke this school system. Now fix it. You're on the wrong side of history.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kim Putens. Kim Putens?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for having me this evening. I actually had an entirely different statement drafted for today's meeting until I saw a tweet that was loved by a member of the school board. The tweet by a teacher essentially accused all parents advocating for opening schools of hating teachers and that we are sending them to death and asking them to teach our kids in person. A basic question that went through my mind is, why is this teacher even teaching if they can't read the many studies that defy this notion, that teaching our kids means that they will be at increased risk for COVID? This has been entirely debunked. Not to mention, as Rory had pointed out, teachers have been vaccinated. More so as a parent, I really became insulted. I'm truly insulted and tired of this school board making a mockery of parents who want their kids in school. When did it become such a horrible idea to want to be in school? Since when did parents become an enemy of the state? I thought when I enrolled my children in FCPS that I was entering into a partnership with the school system to teach my kids and that we would truly be partners in this endeavor. So I asked myself, and I've been scratching my head for the past year, what is going on in this school system? Truly, what is going on when fundamentally our school board and the superintendent mock parents who want their kids in school? I really think every single person on this school board needs to ask themselves that question. Why are you on the school board if we're not all in alignment about teaching our kids? Because it's clearly not about putting students first. It clearly isn't about supporting the educational needs of students, and it isn't about partnering with parents. What is the end game for you? Because I know my end game. My end game as a parent is to do whatever I have to do to support my kids, period, end of story. And I will do whatever it takes. This year has been mind-boggling, heartbreaking, and troubling. I have never heard a single parent or student who advocates for opening schools say they hate teachers. That is absolutely a sickening narrative. And it's only attempts to divide parents and teachers and students and teachers. I have sat idly by while you roll your eyes at parents who want our kids in school. Have you forgotten that we are your constituents too? I also want to just end with one other thing. I have been hearing rumors, we're all hearing rumors that it is absolutely a sham that we are going to bring students back 5 days a week in the fall. And I want you, we are all open to this deception. We have seen it for the past year. And I want you to know that we have every intention of making sure that our kids are back in school 5 days a week next fall, back to normal. I also want to make sure that you are aware that the governor did sign into law SB 1303, and we intend to hold you accountable to that law. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Air Quinn.
Hello, Dr. Brabrand, leadership team, and school board members. My name is Air Queen. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a transgender, non-binary elementary general music teacher at Braddock Elementary School. I also grew up in Fairfax County and graduated from Fairfax High School in 2009. This evening, I will start by spotlighting Autism Acceptance Month and a parent link between autism and gender diversity. A recent study found that up to 15% of adults on the autism spectrum are also transgender, non-binary, or otherwise gender expansive, compared to 5% of non-autistic adults who are gender diverse. Autistic and neurotypical gender expansive adults don't just become transgender or non-binary when they turn 18, but they are gender expansive for their whole lives, including when they are students in our classrooms in Fairfax County Public Schools. As an elementary music teacher, I have the opportunity to see, teach, and learn from every student in a school building, and I value that experience. I value the opportunity to see students who are new to our country and getting to work with neurodiverse students with many levels of need. It is because I see every student in the school that I know I also have gender diverse students, whether they have realized that truth about themselves yet or not. Because I know that I do teach students, both on the autism spectrum and not, who are gender expansive like myself, that has driven me to live authentically as I am. When I was a student in Fairfax County Public Schools, I did not yet know that I was transgender, and there was no representation of transgender or other gender diverse people at school or otherwise. Having representation is not just important for the students who might find a mirror with me or other gender expansive people, but can also help to build empathy within our students for people who are different from themselves, an irrefutable aspect of being an ethical and global citizen. I hope that in the future, being inclusive and affirming of all gender identities in the school setting will be seen as commonplace. One way that we can start on that path is by normalizing the use of our pronouns when we introduce ourselves, as I did tonight when I began. My name is Air Queen, and I use they, them pronouns. We should also ask our students to share their pronouns whenever possible and be accepting if those pronouns change. The next important step that we can take is believing our students when they say who they are, no matter what other labels they may already have or what we might perceive their gender to be. Our students are the experts on themselves, and when a student self-identifies, they are sharing a key part of who they are. It's our responsibility to believe their truths and affirm their gender through our words and actions. I hope that Fairfax County will continue to stand up against transphobia on behalf of all the students we teach. I'm glad that Fairfax County Public Schools has historically been on the side of our 2S LGBTQIA+ students, and I truly hope that we will continue on that path. Students in every school are gender diverse, including and especially our students who receive special education services. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Paige Hahn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Paige Hahn, and I am a parent to a 3rd grader and a 5th grader at Haycock Elementary, one of which who has an IEP. I am also the PTA president. First, I'd like to publicly say that we have an incredibly strong administrative team at Haycock and a fantastic teaching staff, and I consider them partners in education. As PTA president, I can say with certainty that our parent community supports and appreciates what our Haycock team, both teachers and administrators, are doing to go above and beyond for our kids. When we went virtual in March of 2020, I of course understood, and I agree having a virtual option for families now. When cases spiked into November, I agreed pulling back in-person plans, and I have always understood the desire of teachers to be vaccinated. This is to say, I believe I've had a measured approach to school reopenings, but my patience is gone. And so is the patience of many, many parents across this county. Our students are suffering academically, emotionally, and developmentally. The harm being done to our children, particularly those with special needs, far outweighs the threat of COVID-19 in schools. It is well documented that children with special needs and IEPs have not had their needs met this year. You know this, you have documentation on this, and you've seen the lawsuits. You know that children with ADHD cannot thrive in a virtual environment. You know that children with speech delays need additional pullouts. You know that children with significant learning challenges need structure and one-on-one attention, and they need in-person emotional support. For months, you've heard parents plead with you to open full-time. Principals have seen the tears and heard the pain in parents' voices begging for their children to be allowed back in school. You've heard from pediatricians and guidance counselors about how children themselves say they are sad and depressed. You likely have friends with special needs children going into debt to pay for private services that were supposed to be provided by the county. The solution for all children is to open schools 4 days a week now for everyone who wants it and 5 days a week in the fall. This is not a novel idea. 52% of public schools in this country are doing just that. Taking into account private schools, we're well over 60%. Call other large school districts that have opened for best practices. Miami-Dade and Broward in Florida, Clark County in Nevada, Gwinnett County in Georgia, and most recently Charlotte. This isn't because we can't open them full-time. It's because there is a lack of political courage to do so. FCPS is touted as one of the best districts in the nation, a district home to some of the most educated and innovative minds in this country. Let's start acting like it. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have 5 video testimonies from Josh Israel, Robert Rigby, Christy Hudson, Lisa Turkeltaub, and Michelle Liu.
Good evening. My name is Josh Israel. I'm a Fairfax County resident. I was pleased to see on their website that Anderson Mechanical Services makes very clear in their employment section that they do not discriminate on a series of bases, including sexual orientation and gender identity. I'm proud to see that Fairfax County Public Schools is working with a vendor that has the same inclusive approach as been taken by this school board through its non-discrimination policies, and hope this is always the case with contractors and vendors. Several state governments in recent weeks have taken aim at LGBTQ youth, rushing through legislation created by hate groups and aimed at keeping kids from playing sports and accessing appropriate health care. Even here in Virginia, anti-LGBTQ extremists have filed lawsuits trying to overturn the protections enacted by the General Assembly for our transgender and gender nonconforming students. FCPS has been among the leaders in Virginia, and I am proud and grateful that our community has strongly embraced the One Fairfax vision and created policies protecting our kids, faculty, and staff from discrimination and bullying. As elected officials in many places send a message that they believe some kids should be singled out and discriminated against, I implore you all to continue to take steps to remind every kid in our community that they are accepted and valued. And I encourage you to continue to choose contractors like Anderson Mechanical Services who uphold these values and put front and center their commitment to not discriminating. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Dr. Brabrand, leadership team, and school board members. My name is Robert Rigby Jr. I am the co-president of FCPS Pride and was a special education teacher for 22 years, including 8 in Fairfax County schools. FCPS Pride is an organization for LGBTQIA employees, families of LGBTQIA students, and LGBTQIA families in Fairfax County Public Schools. Tonight you are hearing about the special education plan. In my 22 years in special ed, I observed that LGBTQIA students accumulated or piled up in special education programs, in part because discrimination and a lack of welcome led for many children to a lack of school success. In 2020, the General Assembly tasked the Virginia Department of Education with developing a model policy for welcoming transgender students in our state schools. They mandated that local school districts follow suit with their own policies by August 2021. The development of the VDOE model policy involves school professionals, including from FCPS, and school service and social service professionals, including from Fairfax County. During the public comment period in February, many Fairfax teachers, parents, and students wrote in support of the trans welcoming policies. A few wrote in against. There was a raft of anonymous comments against, which apparently came from out of state. Last week, 2 anti-trans organizations brought suit against the state model policy, enumerating a long list of complaints grounded in anti-trans prejudice. I just want to acknowledge and thank the leadership team and the school board for your support and welcome of transgender and gender expansive students in the past, and your ongoing support despite the threat of the anti-trans organizations, in their words, to fight this battle in every single locality. Your standing by us means that trans and other LGBTQIA students, staff, and families will be increasingly welcome and safe in our schools and in the wider community. Thank you.
sometimes, occasionally on Facebook, I have a friend that will make this grand post about their husband. Bob, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I appreciate you. I don't know how you do it all. You work so hard to provide for your family and provide for me. You are so wonderful and great, and I'm so lucky to have you in my life. And then 6 months or a year later, they're getting divorced. And it's almost like when you look back in retrospect, that post, it wasn't the, pound relationship goalpost I thought it was when I first read it. It was actually, an apology. It was an apology to Bob that, things were going downhill, and it's hard to break up on Facebook for sure. And it's embarrassing. And so people only put out there what they want you to see. People don't really put out what's really happening. And that's true in everything. You never really know what goes on behind closed doors. You really don't. And in the virtual environment, what has happened is all of the kids' lives are behind closed doors. The video cameras are off during school. The teachers are not able to interact with the kids the way they want to interact with the kids. And you never really know what's going on in the home and what's causing the problems in school. And if you think about somebody like Elon is a first grader who is reading at grade level, but his math skills are significantly deficient.
Over here, Chairman Anderson.
Elon often does not complete
Is this the confirmed
ST
speaker?
math assignments. Yeah, if you're
Is
grading
this the confirmed
deficiency
speaker?
on ST math, that's a problem in and of itself, because I challenge any school board member to try to do 30 minutes of second grade ST math. And he rarely participates in virtual school. Elon has been absent 3 days in the month of March for unknown reasons. Lauren is an English language learner. Lauren participates well in virtual, but is reading below grade level. Lauren completes all ST math assignments. Lauren is unable to attend virtual school on Friday afternoons due to her mother's work schedule. And in this some kids model that you're rolling out, how do you pick? How do you pick between Lauren and Elon? How is picking between them ethical, equitable, and fair? And the answer is it's not. Okay? Extending 4 days to only 4 kids based on an arbitrary assessment of what you think is happening is unethical, unequitable, discriminatory, and unfair. And I'm gonna make it red for that.
Hi, my name is Michelle Liu, and I'm a student at Longfellow Middle School. This is my school. On March 22nd, around 6:20 p.m., an Asian boy was practicing soccer right. 4 teenage boys came up to the Asian boy and started verbally harassing him. This is just one of the many Asian hate incidents that has happened in our community since the pandemic. It is very disturbing to me, and now I would like to ask the Fairfax County School Board to add more Asian American history in the K-12 curriculum. Dear Fairfax County School Boards and Dr. Braybrand, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about a very important issue. We, the students, parents, and teachers of Fairfax County Public Schools, petitioned the Fairfax County School Board to include more Asian American history within the required curriculum and resources for all grades K through 12. Currently, there are few historic references to the experiences of Asian American people in the Fairfax County K through 12 curriculum. As a result, many teachers and students have little knowledge of Asian American history. The lack of knowledge contributes to a one-sided view of American history and creates the impression that Asian American experiences are not valued. Close to 20% of Fairfax County's population is of AAPI descent. It is important their history to be acknowledged and that students see themselves as a part of the American story. It is essential to tell all sides of the historic events, as well as the stories of the people all across the globe. Students are not learning enough about the famous and hidden figures that came from Asian countries and contributed to America's success. If Asian American history is included in the Fairfax County K-12 curriculum, then more students and teachers will understand how Asian American people have positively shaped America's history. This new understanding may have the additional benefit of increasing positive interactions. The Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, Heritage Month, will begin on May 1st of 2021. During this month, as Asian American history and stories are shared across the county, we ask that the Fairfax County School Board seriously consider changes to the next year's K-12 curriculum that include Asian American history. Thank you for your time and attention in addressing this important issue. We are counting on you to help make this change possible.
Thank you. Please be informed that due to an unexpected development, we will forego our student representative matters at the request of our student representative. At this time, we're up to item 3.03, the Local Special Education Annual Plan and Report.
Dr. Anderson, I'm sorry, but before we go on to the next portion of the agenda, would it be possible for us to make sure that the citizen participation videos are clearly marked as to who is presenting those materials? Because I got confused and I'm not sure whether they were two separate videos or if it was one video and who was responsible for each.
Absolutely. There were two separate videos, and I apologize for the confusion to all. We will be sure to at least identify in between who the speakers are. I think one rolled right into the other.
But
there were two separate videos.
I appreciate that, and I'm sorry for the interruption.
No problem. That's fine. Sorry I didn't see your hand there. Item 3.03, the Local Special Education Annual Plan and Report. I now call on Dr. Brabrand for the introduction.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson and members of the school board. Tonight, it's our pleasure to share with you the Local Special Education Annual Plan and Report for the school year 2021 and 2022. This is something we started to bring to the board just a few years ago, that we are required to share annually about how we spend federal dollars towards special education. Now, you'll hear tonight we spend, this is focused on how we spend federal education, but federal education dollars supporting special education are really only a drop in the bucket. We really rely on our local Fairfax County support to provide the kind of education that we do for our special education students. But it's very important for you to see how we're spending our federal dollars. And Dr. Boyd, our Assistant Superintendent for Special Services, is here tonight, and she will be sharing this presentation. So Dr. Boyd, without further ado.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Again, my name is Michelle Boyd, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Special Services, and I'll be joined this evening by a variety of members from the Special Services team. Ms. Leah Skirpsky, Director of Operations and Strategic Planning, Ms. Jacqueline Prentice, Finance Coordinator, Mr. Mike Bloom, Director of Special Education Instruction, and Dr. James Strong, Director of Special Education Procedural Support. This evening, we're going to be sharing information regarding FCPS's 2021-2022 Special Education Annual Plan, which is the process in which school divisions demonstrate their eligibility for federal funds through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act 2004, or known as IDEA, to support students with disabilities within their jurisdiction. Fairfax County Public Schools is required by state and federal law to submit an IDEA annual plan to the Virginia Department of Education. In this plan, FCPS must demonstrate its eligibility to receive a flow-through allocation from the state's federal IDEA Part B grant award. The IDEA Part B refers to the provisions related to the formula grants that assist states in providing a free, appropriate, and public education in the least restrictive environment for children with disabilities ages 3 through 21 inclusive. The plan also outlines how FCPS plans to use the IDEA funding for special education services provided to identified children with disabilities. The anticipated award for the 2021-2022 school year is $38.3 million. The link provided on the slide takes you to the VDOE website, which provides detailed information on the federal IDEA Part B funding and the state's various reporting requirements for your reference. At the state level, IDEA compliance is governed by the Code of Virginia. FCPS must ensure that all children with disabilities, that is, for which it is responsible for, including children who are parentally placed in private schools within our jurisdiction, are provided with certain rights and protections. The Code of Virginia also requires the IDEA annual plan to be reviewed by the school division's local advisory board, and an FCPS referred to that board as the Advisory Committee for Students with Disabilities. This review took place on March 10th of 2021. The Code of Virginia also requires FCPS's school board approval of the IDEA annual plan prior to submission to the Virginia Department of Education. During this presentation, we will highlight some of the components of the IDEA annual plan. This year, the IDEA annual plan is due by May 14th, 2021, and a detailed timeline will be provided later in this presentation. The FCPS FY22 advertised budget for special education totals $594.8 million, which is 18.8% of FCPS's $3.2 billion operating budget. Based on the FY21 allocation, we anticipate receiving $38.3 million in IDEA funds and will describe our intended use for those anticipated allocation this evening. There are two IDEA Part B awards. Section 611, which funds eligible services for K-12 special education activities and early intervening services, and Section 619, which funds eligible preschool services. FCPS projects the IDEA grant awards will be $37.4 million for the Section 611 award and $0.8 million for the Section 619 or preschool award. The 2021-2022 IDEA annual plan assumes FCPS will receive awards that are similar to what was received last year. The IDEA annual plan is a formal agreement between the Fairfax School Board and the Virginia Department of Education for implementing federal and state laws and regulations governing special education services. Once the Virginia Department of Education approves the IDEA annual plan, FCPS can spend what was agreed to in the plan for expenditures to be eligible for reimbursement. The 2021-2022 annual plan covers the federal grant period of July 1, 2021 through September 30th of 2023. Over the last 5 years, FCPS's IDEA Part B allocations in total have increased by $2.7 million or 7.7% from $35.5 million in FY17 to $38.3 million in FY21. Looking at the year-to-year changes from FY17 to FY21, the largest increase in IDEA awards amounts is 3.3%, which occurred in FY19. There was no increase in FY20 and 21, reflects a 3.2% increase. During the same period of time, the number of students with disabilities for which FCPS is responsible fluctuated, with the FY21 enrollment being similar to that in FY17. The Virginia Department of Education has not yet released the projected 611 and 619 awards. Therefore, projections contained in our 21-22 IDEA annual plan and application workbook is based on the actual FY21 award. Once the actual FY 2022 awards are known, BDOE will have FCPS adjust the budgeted amounts as needed. Each year, historically in December, BDOE releases a superintendent's memo that details, under the provisions of IDEA, what local school districts are required to submit. Requirements for the 21-22 IDEA annual plan were released on December 4th of 2020, along with the standard workbook to use when developing and submitting the IDEA grant application and report on implementation. The required components are listed on this slide. For the purpose of this presentation, I will highlight these key requirements. FCPS must have established policies, procedures, and programs that are administered to comply with IDEA. These include federal IDEA regulations, BDOE established policies and procedures for IDEA compliance. The IDEA eligibility requires FCPS to certify specific assurance. Examples of the assurances include items such as responsibility for controlling grant funds, maintaining required grant documentation, restricting the use of grant funds to acceptable activities under IDEA, maintaining the maintenance of effort, and maintaining a proportionate set aside for children with disabilities who are parentally placed in private schools. To be eligible for the IDEA grant funds, FCPS ensures that it has procedures in place to help prevent barriers from accessing special education programs on the basis of gender, race, national origin, color, disability, or age. Another component of the grant application requires school divisions with a regional or local jail in its jurisdiction to certify if there is an interagency agreement with the sheriff or jail administrator responsible for the operation of the jail. FCPS provides a full instructional program at the Juvenile Detention Center. FCPS also has an interagency agreement with the Fairfax County Sheriff, who operates the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. The agreement outlines responsibilities for the provision of compulsory special education services to eligible inmates at the Adult Detention Center. As a part of the IDEA annual plan, FCPS must report on the implementation of the prior year's plan. In FCPS, flow-through funds for school year 2019-2020 were used to support activities related to two major goals for students with disabilities. One, providing an appropriate identification, evaluation, and therapeutic and instructional services. And two, providing child find, screening, and evaluation services for children ages 2 to 5. In the next two slides, you'll see reported data on the number of services, number of students served, and other key data points related to the implementation of special education activities during the 2019-2020 school year. FCPS used the majority of the IDEA grant funds it received for personnel costs, including salary and benefits. There were 298.6 FTEs in total, of which 292.6 FTEs were funded by Section 611 and 6 FTEs were funded by Section 619. The 611 funded positions, of the 292.6, 250 of those positions were special education positions, and 42.6 positions supported coordinated early intervening services for students without IEPs who are struggling. We will discuss CIS, or coordinated early intervening services, in more detail later in this presentation. The majority of the positions funded by 611 were school-based. Special education teachers totaled 224 FTEs, or 89.6% of the 250 FTEs supported by Section 611. Section 619 supported six school-based positions supporting early childhood special education. Here you will see that during the 2019-2020 school year, FCPS provided primary and related services totaling 47,576 services. Examples of those services would include specific learning disability services, autism services, non-categorical services that might be provided to support reading comprehension, decoding, executive functioning, and a number of other supports needed for our students to access a free, appropriate public education. We also served a total of 28,051 students with disabilities. This includes students enrolled in FCPS, receiving contracted services, and those in private schools or being homeschooled. In the 2019-2020 school year, FCPS screened 1,411 preschool students suspected for disabilities through initial evaluations. Child find activities were done for 1,411 preschool students who were screened for suspected disabilities at area preschools and daycare centers. Diagnostic center personnel completed 3,579 evaluations for preschool-age children. Out of the 1,235 preschool eligibilities, 1,121 students were determined to be eligible for special education services. You'll note on this slide the total number of psychological, social, cultural, and speech and language evaluations and reevaluations that were completed on last year. These are the data points that have been identified for reporting by FCPS in our grant application. During the 2019-2020 school year, evaluations and assessments reflect the impact of the unprecedented extended school closure in spring 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Psychological evaluations decreased by 3,073 or 20.8% as compared to the prior year. There were 10,309 students found eligible and 1,383 students found ineligible for special education services during that time frame. The 2021-2022 IDEA annual plan contains a report on implementation for the prior year. The data used for that report is based on FY20 actuals. The additional periods contained in this chart are for information purposes only to assist with providing context regarding FCPS's special education programming. From this chart, you will see the trends in the number of special education services provided and enrollment for students with disabilities. During the last 5 years, the number of students with disabilities and services provided have incrementally increased with the exception of the decline noted this year. The number of students with disabilities referenced for the IDEA annual plan includes students receiving contract services, those parentally placed in private schools, and those who are homeschooled that have individualized service plans, which averages around 410 students. While the overall number of students with disabilities for which FCPS is responsible has decreased this year, the number of students served receiving contract services, homeschool, and private school has increased by 7.6% or 31 students. This chart shows the enrollment for K-12 students with disabilities based on the least restrictive environment, also referred to as LRE. The majority of students with disabilities, approximately 60%, spend most of their day in general education settings. Conversely, approximately 12% of FCPS students spend most of their day in special education settings, as noted by the percent of students who spend less than 40% of time in general ed settings or who are served in other settings. As previously mentioned, the 21-22 IDEA annual plan application report on prior year implementation reflects data from 2020. The additional periods contained in this chart are again for informational purposes to assist with context. As illustrated in this table, the total number of psychological evaluations and social cultural assessments have gradually increased, like the number of students with disabilities, from FY16 to FY19. However, there was a notable decrease in the total number of evaluations in FY20, despite the increased number of students with disabilities, which is attributed to the unprecedented school closure as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. While staff have been conducting evaluations while students were virtual during the 2020-21 school year, year-to-date actuals for evaluations through February indicate the total number of evaluations will not be comparable to pre-pandemic years. The number of psychological evaluations for re-evaluations for this year shows the most significant decrease. The decrease may be attributable to teams using existing data to determine continued eligibility as is permissible by the special education regulations. The next section goes back to our components for our annual plan application. Maintenance of effort is a requirement that school divisions spend from state and local funds an amount equal to or greater than the amount spent for special education and related services in the prior fiscal year. As a part of the IDEA annual plan, VDOE, or the Virginia Department of Education, obtains information to see whether a school district is projected to meet its maintenance of effort. This data is based on the overall special education program, not just the $38.3 million IDEA grant. There are 4 maintenance of effort tests that VDOE uses to see if a district is projected to meet its special education maintenance of effort requirements. FCPS receives funding from 3 sources: federal, state, and local funding. However, federal funding is excluded from the MOE calculation. FCPS has consistently met its special education maintenance of effort requirements. The 21-22 application projects FCPS spending at the same amount certified in the maintenance of effort calculation for the school year 2019-2020 as submitted in January of 21. The pie chart on this slide shows FY20 special education costs as reported to the VDOE and FCPS's FY 2020 annual school report. FCPS spends significantly more on special education than what is received from federal and state contributions. For FY 2020, the federal and state contributions combined total $88.6 million, or 14.6% of the $607.3 million spent on special education. By comparison, $518.7 million, or 85.4%, came from local funds. The annual plan requests information on the division's budget relative to coordinated early intervening services, known as CEIS, and proportionate set-aside requirements. Divisions that are not mandated to provide comprehensive coordinated early intervening services may choose to voluntarily set aside up to 15% of their IDEA award for CEIS. FCPS voluntarily sets aside $5.7 million, the 15% maximum allowed, to provide support for students who are not currently identified as needing special education services. For example, CEIS funds supplement the cost of behavioral, social, emotional development programs, such as implementing positive behavior approach, specialized attendance interventions, restorative justice programs, and many more. The local school divisions must expend funds to provide special education and related services for parentally placed private school children with disabilities enrolled in private schools located within their jurisdiction. In FCPS, parentally placed private school students are eligible to receive related services such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech and language services through an individualized service plan. VDOE provides a formula that FCPS uses to calculate the required special education proportionate set-aside. As previously shared, the proportionate set-aside is one of the assurances that FCPS must provide in order to receive federal funding. FCPS's proportionate set-aside requirement totals $0.3 million. In summary, as referenced earlier this evening, the 2021-2022 IDEA annual plan covers the federal grant period of July 1, 2021 through September 30th, 2023. In Section 611, the projected budget is $37.4 million, and Section 619, the projected budget is $0.8 million. The projected set-aside for CEIS, or Coordinated Early Intervening Services, is $5.7 million, and the mandatory projected proportionate set-aside totals $0.3 million. The two IDEA awards, 611 and 619, will primarily be used to fund personnel costs for 301.6 full-time equivalent positions supporting special education, preschool, and coordinated early intervening service activities, most of which include special education teachers. The remaining grant award is allocated for indirect costs and professional development subscription. BDOE has set FCPS's indirect cost rate at 1.1%, which permits FCPS to claim administrative or overhead costs up to 1.1% of reimbursable costs, which amounts to approximately $0.4 million. Indirect costs are appropriately, again, $0.4 million and are included in the budget. A small amount, or $20,500, is used for a subscription for professional development. In closing, here is our timeline for submitting the IDEA annual plan for 2021-2022. The plan was reviewed by our ACSD, or Advisory Committee for Students with Disabilities, on March 10th of 2021. School board action and requested approval is scheduled for April 23rd. And to be eligible to receive the projected $38.3 million in IDEA grant funding, we must submit the annual plan application to the Virginia Department of Education electronically no later than May 14th of 2021. Thank you for your time this evening, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boyd. I'm sure we'll have several questions from board members, but as a reminder to all, the board will be taking action on the special education annual plan at the April 22nd meeting, which is the next scheduled regular business meeting. At this time, I invite board members who do have questions to signal to me in some way, and we will start with Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you very much, Dr. Boyd. This was a very comprehensive presentation of the IDEA plan. And recognizing that this is only a small portion of the overall expenses and work that you do with your department in support of our students, our exceptional students with disabilities. I have a couple of questions for you. The first is just as a reminder to me, because I see that we are now receiving 6.4% of our total funding from the IDEA. I believe that's a decrease in overall percentage year over year, and it certainly is not the percentage of funding that is called for in the IDEA. Could you remind me what the IDEA calls for the federal funding in support of our exceptional students with disabilities?
Certainly. So the Part B of IDEA allows for up to 40% of funding from the federal allocations of Part B. Unfortunately, as you indicated, we are not close to that rate. And so again, much of our special education programming at this time is supported by local dollars. So again, up to 40% from federal dollars could be allocated as indicated in IDEA Section B.
With that, I would like to especially thank the taxpayers of Fairfax County for their generous support of our students in this area, because it is certainly an area that we know is one of the most important areas of our work, and it's one that certainly is largely attributable to the support of Fairfax County. Secondly, and I sent you this question earlier. The demographics of those students who are identified for IDEA, do we have those demographics?
Yes, we do. And again, thank you for the question. So what we did in terms of demographic, and again, thank you for sharing that question in advance for us so that we would have that information available to share with the board and also with the community. As we look at our racial outbreak for students with disabilities, 32% of our students with disabilities, race and ethnicity is identified as Hispanic. 4.9% are identified as 2 or more racial ethnicities. 0.29% as American Indian or Alaskan Native. 9.96% Asian. 11.35% Black, and 41.2% white, and 0.12% Native white. And we also looked at where those percentages are comparable to our overall representation of those various ethnic and racial groups within our membership within FCPS. And as we can certainly provide this in detail to the board, but at a high level, the major differences are for our Hispanic students and our students who identify as white. Those students are identified, there's a 4.97% difference in those representations. And for our students who are identified as Asian, compared to their representation in our overall population, it's a decrease of 9.84%.
Thank you. And if you don't mind sending those to us in writing, I'd really appreciate it. Third,
certainly.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion in the long overdue modifications to the restraint and seclusion regulation. And a key part of that with students returning to our schools now and in the fall full time. Can you give us a little bit, because I see there's some professional development funding here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing on professional development for behaviors so that we make sure that we meet all the timelines for the restraint and seclusion regulation?
Certainly, and with that question, I'll invite Mr. Bloom into the room, our Director of Special Education and Instruction. He provides key leadership in collaboration with Deborah Scott, who is our Director of Intervention and Prevention around restraint and seclusion. Mr. Bloom, would you provide an update to the board on pending PD and where we are relative to supporting our new policy around restraint and seclusion?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Boyd. So as a result of the new policy on restraint and seclusion, we did have professional development that was provided to staff, instructional staff in all schools prior to January 1st, which was level 1 training on pre-crisis de-escalation. We also had advanced training that was provided to an administrator and members of school teams within our school buildings. The advanced training is provided in Fairfax County through MANT system training and/or professional crisis management or PCM training. This training provides the techniques involved for de-escalation, as well as if staff needed to physically intervene, they would be able to do that in a safe manner. A majority of those courses focused on de-escalation, pre-crisis, relationship building, communication skills, and a smaller portion of the training is the actual physical interaction techniques that staff would engage with students in order to keep students and staff safe in an emergency situation. Also, as far as training initiatives, we have partnered, as many of you know, with Dr. Ross Green on his collaborative and proactive solutions approach. And I've been in communication with Dr. Green, and we've got a couple of dates that are set on our calendar. April 13th, Dr. Green will be meeting with some of our central office behavioral support members, our behavior intervention teachers, our applied behavior analysis coaches, and some of our special education central office behavioral support team. And then on April 19th, Dr. Green will be meeting in the morning with a number of our school-based administrators, as well as our public day administrators, our CSS site administrators, and also in the afternoon with select instructional staff, which includes teachers and instructional assistants. These meetings will inform a more comprehensive plan that we'll be working with Dr. Green on to scale up and provide some division-wide training in collaborative and proactive solutions. Another initiative that we've piloted at Burke School is the Ukuru methodology. This, again, is a trauma-informed approach that teaches staff information related to trauma-informed education, de-escalation, and also provides staff with tools and resources necessary to diffuse potential situations where students may become physically aggressive, and they're able to do that in a safe way to minimize the use of physical restraint and seclusion. We also have a number of trainings that are provided that are school-based by our behavior intervention teachers, our ABA coaches. All of the training that they provide is provided virtually this school year, and we'll be expanding some of that training as we can for face-to-face interactions. Right now, they are in schools providing job-embedded coaching with staff for students who are experiencing behavioral challenges, and we continue to provide that level of support both in the virtual environment and in the in-person environment. So those are just a few of the initiatives around professional development that we're continuing to provide, and we'll continue to work together with our other departments and our school-based administrators so that as we look at the calendar for the summer and next school year, we're providing opportunities to scale up this training division-wide.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. That's very helpful. And since you mentioned the summer training and what to expect this summer, I apologize for not sending this question earlier, but I would appreciate if somebody can address either tonight or in the next couple of weeks the plans for extended school year in support of our students, as well as how we will be using the American Relief Act funds that have targeted funding for our special needs population for summer programming.
Certainly, and thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. I'll invite Mr. Bloom, he is our lead for ESY, to just give us a very brief snippet on ESY, and Dr. Jane Strong to weigh in to provide some updates on our plans for recovery services that will take place on this summer, as well as some of those things that are taking place as we speak.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. So I'll begin with ESY services. So we have been planning really all this school year long for our summer services, our extended school year services. This summer, we are going to be providing both virtual options and in-person options for students. Both will be 5 days per week, which is a change from last school year where we were providing virtual services only for 4 days per week. And so we're happy to be able to expand that to a 5-day per week program and offer choice for parents in terms of their students attending either virtual or in person. We'll be holding our school-based services in 16 sites. We have 13 elementary sites, and we also have 3 secondary sites. And then our public day sites, Burke School, Key and Kilmer Center, as well as Cedar Lane School and Quander Road School, will be providing their own summer services to students with disabilities. Of course, children who may require extended school year outside of the school-based program work together with IEP teams to determine additional services that might be required, again, that might fall outside of our scheduled summer program.
Good evening. I am going to chime in a little bit for how we are planning for our summer recovery services. And some of our relief funds are being used to fund summer programming for students with disabilities whose IEP team has determined that the student qualifies for a recovery program. These services will be provided in some of the same schools where ESY will be located, And on a small scale, there are some plans for some recovery services at base elementary schools. IEP teams are hard at work, working with families to identify the students and the areas for which they need recovery and the dates and times for those services. That work is ongoing, and I know that our school principals and our special education teachers are quickly trying to get these plans in place, and we are staffing our program for the Summer Recovery Academy.
This is Mike again. I'll also mention that for members of our community who would like additional information on extended school year services, our public webpage has all of the sites that will be providing ESY services as well as bell schedules. If you go to the FCPS webpage and do a search for ESY or extended school year services, you can have access to many more details regarding our summer services.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank you. Are there any other board members wishing to ask a question before I take my turn? Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just briefly, I appreciate this great summary, and I have many questions, but I'm not going to ask all of them tonight, and hopefully we'll catch up in the moment. But I had a couple questions. In the narrative that accompanied the PowerPoint, I noticed that there was a couple of statements made about paraprofessional training, the right to participate in state assessment systems, and data regarding LEA that goes to the state. So, and I'm happy to follow up with you at another time, but I was curious if you could talk a little more about the paraprofessional training that we do, as well as when it talks about the right to participate in state assessment systems, does this include alternative assessment systems? And the third question on LEA is, do you know what our recent status is on Indicator 5?
Dr. Boyd?
Yes, I'm sorry for the delay. It took a while for my camera to catch on.
I know there's a lot of questions I threw at you, so I apologize for that. But.
No worries, no worries. We do have some information when you talk about Indicator 5 and Indicator 6. So we share some information regarding the LRE specifically as it relates to our students who are educated in K-12 settings, and we do have comparable data regarding LRE for our preschool students, and we can certainly provide that information for you. And you broke up just a little bit, and I apologize for asking you to repeat the first part of your question, but I don't think I completely caught the first part.
The first one was about paraprofessional training as required. I was just curious if you could elaborate a little bit on what paraprofessional training we provide to our paraprofessionals who are working with our special education students.
Sure. And then Mike Bloom can certainly add on. But as a result of some House bill guidance, we have to have specific training for our paraprofessionals who are supporting students with autism. And there's a variety of ways that particular training can take place, but it really gets at ensuring that persons are knowledgeable of how to work and support students with autism, characteristics of autism, and understanding the various dynamics around supporting those student populations. But Mr. Bloom, if you'll talk a little bit more about how that's been done in FCPS to share with the board and Ms. Rashna Sizemore-Heiser at this time.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Boyd. So our Applied Behavior Analysis program provides training to instructional assistants and paraprofessionals who are working with students with autism, as Dr. Boyd mentioned. And we've created a number of modules that paraprofessionals can access. Of course, pre-COVID, we were providing a lot of in-person training on the fundamentals of ABA, on verbal behavior, supporting behaviors, supporting curriculum as paraprofessionals work in our enhanced autism classrooms, our secondary classrooms, our preschool autism classrooms. And we've also provided virtual training since COVID in a number of those modules as well. So as Dr. Boyd mentioned, it is a requirement. So we've had to transition a lot of that training from the in-person module to the virtual modules. In addition, we've also provided our paraprofessionals with training around the reduction of restraint and seclusion. So all of the same requirements for our instructional staff around the level 1 training for restraint and seclusion. Our paraprofessionals have taken that training and are required to take that training. And then we also provide level 2 advanced training for identified paraprofessionals who are working directly with students who may require the use of physical restraint and or seclusion. In addition to that, our central office team, our ABA coaches, our behavior intervention teachers also provide job-embedded coaching and assistance in school-based professional development to paraprofessionals around instructional best practices, supporting students within general ed and self-contained special education classrooms. And at the request of building administrators, we can also provide shoulder-to-shoulder coaching sessions with our paraprofessionals. We do also focus very often on our new paraprofessionals, new to FCPS, new to teaching and new to our classrooms, so that again, we can provide an additional layer of support and professional development as they begin their careers or as they enter Fairfax County Public Schools working with our students with disabilities.
Great, thank you. Just a couple questions to follow up. First, you had said that the level 1 is required regarding the sort of reducing student behavior, but in terms of the ABA and VB training that you provide, what of that is mandatory? And what of that involves, I guess, pre-COVID, sort of practicing the skills? Because with ABA and VB, a lot of it is practicing as opposed to learning. But really, what is mandated for our paraprofessionals in that training?
Well, the state mandates certain components to be covered within the training. And so our ABA program has identified and they've done a crosswalk with the requirements from the state of Virginia. And so any of our paraprofessionals who participate in our fundamentals of ABA training as well as our verbal behavior training, they would be receiving the required training as required by the state of Virginia. But you're right, the in-person training provided additional opportunities for participation, for looking more specifically and working in small groups around some of the techniques and some of the ABA methodology. We're still able to do that in a virtual environment. We do use videos in a lot of that training to show examples of some of the ABA techniques with students and teachers and instructional assistants within the classroom. Our ABA team over the years has videotaped a number of scenarios and situations that they utilize during that training. And so once the pandemic hit, we did try to enhance our training so that we would include more of those opportunities for staff to be able to see in action some of the techniques that are used within the classroom setting.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that. I guess I didn't quite answer the question of which of that part is mandated, but we can follow up online on that one, not just what mandates with the state, but which of those trainings are mandated, which are not for our IAs, but I can follow up with you offline on that. The last question, I guess, was about state assessments and the right to participate in state assessments. I had asked that one as the second one. I don't know if I broke up then, Dr. Boyd, when I asked that one.
Sure. So, and if I'm not fully addressing your question, please let me know. So, yes, our students with disabilities do have the right to participate in our state assessments, and we do have a variety of ways, as you know, in which they can participate, whether that be the standards of learning or whether they participate in our Virginia alternate assessment program. And that is something that we work to ensure, particularly when students are enrolled in those SOL courses, that they are given those opportunities to participate in those state assessments, as are their peers without disabilities.
So
did that address your question?
I just wanted to clarify that right is not just SOL assessments, but any assessments?
Correct. So we're talking about division-wide assessments, correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time and your answers. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Are there any other school board members wishing to speak? Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, my question is to Dr. Brabrand and Dr. Boyd. I don't know if it's relevant to the presentation, but I wanted to pick up a little bit where my colleague, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, had asked some questions about statistically where we're looking at our student populations, where we're either seeing overrepresentation of certain student populations compared to underrepresentation to the general population, if that kind of analysis gets done on an annual basis, because again, a lot of this leads to better delivery of services. My concern being that we know over time, we hear from families how they can access special education services, and that some families in our communities are afforded the opportunity of not just having English as their first language, but whether they have the financial means to have advocates or other accesses to even attorneys to help them in accessing special education. And so when I think about our annual review of special education services, what weighs on my mind is how do we as a system continuously improve and ensure that every child, regardless of background and circumstance, can access the special education services they need. So if my question is really outside the bounds of the report, then my apologies. If it's tangentially connected, and especially to what Ms. Corbett-Sanders said, then that would be what's weighing most of my mind with the report tonight.
Sure. So thank you so much for the question. So one of the things we do always want to be mindful as we look at our eligibility practices, our identification and evaluation practices, we always want to be mindful that we're not having, as you said, those disproportionate, whether it's overrepresentation or underrepresentation. And so there are some state indicators that have each school division to evaluate that process and looking at their systems. But also the things that we're doing is we shared some information with you, but we can also go back and calculate risk ratios as we would look at different students based on racial and ethnicity to share with schools, to share with you all as our community. If there are situations where one particular racial or ethnic group is more likely to be identified as a student with a disability than others. Again, those, as we looked at our data for this year compared to our fall membership, we're showing underrepresentation in the area, or I shouldn't use the word underrepresentation, a lower representation of our students who identify as Asian, and a higher representation with our students who identify as Hispanic and our students who identify as white being eligible for special education services. But we can certainly provide more detailed information using some risk ratios and working with our partners in the Chief Equity Officer's office to be able to really look more closely at those practices further.
No, I appreciate that, Dr. Boyd. And I know as we are so fortunate to have you having joined the system, that you'll help bring fresh eyes to the work we do here, what maybe you've learned from other school divisions. But again, I think where my concern is that as a system, until we start to sort of peel back the onion of looking at what our special education population is, who's in it, who do we hear from, maybe even our ombudsman's office, of families saying that they're not being able to access special education services. We certainly have through the PSLs and our due process processes already in place, where families are saying to us, we're trying to get special education services and we can't. And finally, I would just share with my colleagues and Dr. Brabrand that we also have situations, and I'll include my own family, where if you never had an introduction and understanding of special education, you may not even know to ask for your child to be evaluated. And one of my own sons, it wasn't until high school that as I started to understand and learn some things about special education needs, and but my husband and I were in a situation where we could get that evaluation done. And I just can't help but think about how many unidentified children we may have, and how that contributes to some of the achievement gaps that we wrestle with and want to try and close. So anyway, that's sort of, I would say, overall, when I think about our special education work and our annual review of how we're utilizing these dollars, just what are we doing in our identification practices, and I think that requires that deeper analysis. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Seeing that there are no other speakers, I will quickly take a turn. I just have one quick question, but before I ask, I do want to say, Dr. Boyd, I would be quite interested in what you've just talked about regarding using the risk ratio to evaluate student representation. As we know, this is a process that is utilized quite frequently in the disciplinary process to determine overrepresentation. And I think such data may really uncover some information that will help improve our processes. So I look forward to that work. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. My question, it's really a very quick one, and now I cannot find my page. Oh, there it is. Regarding the CEIS, the Coordinated Early Intervention Services, you mentioned that there was a set aside of 15%. How did we arrive to that percentage? I'm just curious because I don't understand. If you can give me some additional information there.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anderson. So 15% is the maximum amount that a school division can allocate to use for those CEIS funds out of their grant award. So that's the maximum amount that we can use from federal special ed dollars to support students who do not have IEPs. Some school divisions are required to allocate that 15%. We're not required because we have not been found to be disproportionate. But so we could have said we will allocate 7% or 10%. But the benefit of allocating that maximum amount is to really be able to intervene early and often, because we track those services that are provided through CEIS, to determine if those students are subsequently identified for special education and related services. The goal of utilizing those CEIS funds would be to provide the appropriate supports such that students would not have to be subsequently provided. So it's engaging early and allocating those resources early to have that impact on outcomes.
Oh, thank you so much for that information. Dr. Brabrand?
If I could, I just want to say, one of the things out of this report, right, we're voluntarily putting 15% of those federal dollars for that CEIS to do that proactive. So I do want the board and community to think about, don't just look to see whether the numbers for special ed services are expanding. And maybe one of the things we can do better is talk about how we're doing this earlier intervention so that we can actually meet students and help them while they're starting to struggle, and they may not need to have the special education interventions later. And we need to talk, maybe we can do even more to talk about what we're doing to lean in earlier and really help nip some of these issues with students earlier on so that they're not in need of as much special education or any special education depending. So it's balanced, of course. Some families and kids, some kids obviously need it no matter what. But we are trying to, as I want you to see in this annual plan, being proactive, being voluntary. And the federal government is really trying to say to us, spend that money earlier in the gen ed setting and do those interventions for kids early on. And we're doing that, and maybe we can talk about that in a future work session, a little bit more about what those CEIS activities look like.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. Early intervention is key because the gap only grows as they proceed up in the grades. Those were the last of my questions, at least for now. Seeing that there are no other questions, I will just remind our audience that this plan will be voted upon by the board on April 22nd. At this time, I will turn the agenda, the gavel over to Ms. Pekarsky to take us through the consent agenda items.
Okay, thank you. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Many items listed have gone through board review, and documentation has been provided to all board members and the public in advance. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the meeting. The consent agenda items are on the screen. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. New business. The following are new business agenda items. There will not be a vote on these items tonight, but action is scheduled at a future meeting. The new business items are on the screen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pekarsky. At this time, we are up to agenda item 7.01, Superintendent Matters. I call on Dr. Brabrand for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Chairman Anderson, members of the school board and community. Just really want to go over a couple of things very briefly with you. First of all, I hope everyone had a wonderful spring break. And we're really approaching the moment where we look back on a year where we were a year ago at this moment and where we are now. And certainly having that perspective as we move forward. We are in a much better place than we were a year ago. And we know there's still more work to do in our school system as we serve students going forward. But I do want to share with you that we've shared some promising news, of course, over the last several weeks with the revised CDC guidance. And after spring break, we shared that we were moving to 3 feet and using that to expand opportunities for students for in-person instruction, using first our MTSS model for those kids who are most struggling, and then looking at kids who were in for 2 days, providing 4 days of instruction as staffing and school capacity allows. I do want to clarify, we provided some additional news today. The CDC guidance says 3 feet for elementary regardless of community transmission, but for middle and high, it says only if you are not in high community transmission. We've been in high community transmission, but this week it's dipped down from high into a lower category of substantial. And so we're excited that we're going to be able to go to 3 feet at our middle and high, which is going to open up additional opportunities, not just at the elementary level, but at the middle and high school level. So we're very excited. Just a reminder, I know everybody's excited. I know everybody wants to know more about those opportunities. Principals will be communicating out directly, and families will be contacted directly by the child's school. So please give patience and grace to our school folks as they reach out to parents. And right now, please don't be calling in. The school folks are going through the data now, and will be reaching out directly to your child. And it will look different from school to school. One of the big reminders is that the in-person percentage of interest in our schools has ranged from 20% in person in some schools to 80% in person in others. So those are dramatic differences. One of the things we need to do, and we know we need to do as we expand these in-person opportunities, is to continue to build confidence with our community and our families and our students, for all of our families and kids to be prepared to return to school in person in the fall. The CDC director, you may have seen today, talked about she believes all school systems in the United States will be in a place to have in-person instruction. We've already communicated that we'll have 5 days of in-person instruction. And we're also seeing some promising news. Again, we're going to stay up with the latest updates around vaccinations. We know we've done a massive job of vaccinations here for our community, but we're getting some data that the CDC director shared today that maybe by mid-May, vaccinations may be available for students as at the age as early as 12. So we're certainly going to be in discussions. Dr. Boyd, who you heard earlier tonight, and working with our health department to do the kind of vaccination campaign that we were able to do with staff. We really want to reach out to our families and our kids so we can get ready for the summer and the fall. Again, there's continues to be a lot of moving parts, and again, ultimately, we want to have vaccinations available for all of our students all the way down to pre-K kids through 12th grade. So we're going to continue to work with the health department and bring you information. We have a return to school work session coming up in just a few more weeks. And we'll be having more information on a host of things around return to school, and we'll be very excited to be sharing those updates with you. The other thing I just wanted to mention is as we come into April here and we're expanding instruction for in-person, that a lot of our work in May will be around testing. We are having SOL testing. We want everyone to know that that is still part of the expectation from the state and from the federal government. And we are encouraging our folks that testing is in person, and schools are really working hard to arrange their schedules for the testing that's required to come in while still being following all the social distancing policies and safety mitigation policies. Families do have the right, as they always have had, to refuse the SOL test, but the state is providing a remote access test that is like the SOL. It will not be the SOL. It'll be a separate assessment, because the state is trying to make sure that we're capturing data on the kids that come in to test in person, but also those that remain virtual, so that can really help us in Fairfax County, but around the Commonwealth, really inform instruction for the fall. And so I wanted you to be aware of that. And I also, just while we're talking about May, after the month of May, we'll be getting to June and graduation. And I do want to communicate to you that we have gotten very, very positive news from Governor Northam through our advocacy and some advocacy around other parts of the state. But I want you to know that Fairfax was front and center with the Secretary of Education, the state superintendent, and the governor's office to provide in-person graduation at all of our high schools. More information will be coming out soon. I know, I see Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, who, like me, is a parent of the class of 2021, and having the opportunity, again, socially distanced, we're going to need to follow guidelines, and we will, and there will be information that, again, school principals will be sharing out in the weeks ahead around those opportunities. So we're very excited about all of that. And again, thank you very much. And I just want to do a final reminder, thanks to Dr. Boyd and her team for tonight's conversation. I know we started, I think, under Karen Corbett Sanders' leadership as chair a couple of years ago to bring this annual report, and really something that we've always done internally, and building the transparency for our community to see a report. How's the money spent? What are the trends over 4 or 5 years? And I know some of our board members continue to talk about data and data in context, and really lifting this up to be more transparent and have the conversations that were had tonight. And we look forward to being able to provide more information on risk ratios and other things that you brought up, the professional development and training that you brought up tonight. So thank you all, and I'll see you guys really soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brabrand. Now we are up to agenda item 8.01, the board committee reports. I will invite Ms. Sizemore-Heiser from PEC for her report, followed by Ms. Keys-Gamarra from the audit committee.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. The Public Engagement Committee met this month in 2 ways. One, we presented at the work session recently about our citizen participation and public participation revised draft policy, and got some great feedback from our fellow colleagues on this policy. We will now take it back and revise it with the feedback we got, take it back to PEC one more time, and then bring it back to our board for a vote on our revised citizen participation. But I just want to give a big shout out to my committee members, for Karen Corbett Sanders, Carl Frisch, and Abrar Ramesh for all their hard work on that citizen participation policy. I think we did a lot. And thank you also to our clerk, who provided some great information, Eileen Mellberg. I think we got a lot done in a few months on revising that. We also continued our work on our advisory committees. We are in the process of doing the work charged to us by the forum topic to update the policies and procedures of our advisory committees in accordance, of course, with applicable state law. So we have started work on what we're calling informally an operating manual of sorts for our advisory committees, and we looked at 4 main topics. Each of our members reported out on research 4 main topics. One was membership roles and responsibilities. The other was the structure and expectations of the end of the year report. Ms. Corbett Sanders presented to us her research and work on the structure of the end of the year report. Ms. Omesh provided us information on her research on membership roles and responsibilities. And then we discussed those at length. And our takeaways from that is 2 of us are going to work on drafting out those 2 sections of the report. And then our next meeting, Mr. Frisch will talk to us more about his research on membership criteria. and I will present my research on policies and procedures of the meetings and suggestions for school board interactions. And so we'll work on those sections of the operating manual. We're hoping to have a draft of that done as sort of an update to bring to the full board. I'm hoping in June, but we'll just see how this work goes. And then we continued our conversation with Helen Lloyd about how to better engage our public, and that's going to be ongoing work about just how do we have better and more robust engagement with our public. So that's a report from PEC. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
Thank you. Yes, we had our monthly audit committee meeting this month, and we really covered two primary topics. The first was the fidelity of implementation audit report, which our Auditor General has been working on for several months. This looks at the board processes and how board motions, directives to the superintendent, et cetera, are monitored. It was quite an extensive report, and it took up most of our meeting because we do realize how we are able to follow the actions of the board helps us to better serve the community. We were not able to finalize that report, but we will be receiving additional information to make sure that we actually have those structures in place. We also talked about the fidelity of the potential audit topics, which all of the board members have received an email regarding, because this would be our work plan for the following year. And this is how we address the concerns for how our Auditor General will allocate her work. So we look forward to the next meeting where we will be able to continue to work on how we monitor and track board actions, which is at the crux of how we do our job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. I'd like to invite Ms. Cohen to provide an update on CPDC committee.
Thank you very much. CPDC met last night. That's our Comprehensive Planning Development Committee, and agreed that the remainder of this year will be used to review and work to implement the recommendations from the Schools Committee of the Planning Commission. Our next meeting will focus on student yield calculation and the Proffers formula. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cohen. And now we will turn it over to Ms. Pekarsky, who will provide us with two reports. One, she will provide an update on the forum that was held earlier this week. And secondly, as the Vice Chair of SCIPT, she will also provide an update from that committee.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Mine are just a little bit lengthier, but I will try to go fast. The board discussed two forum topics this week on April 6th. The first one was presented by Ms. Omesh, school board member at large, regarding our religious accommodations policy. Ms. Omesh was seeking board consensus to send this policy along with the associated regulation to the governance committee for review. She advocated that in order to be a competitive school system with a caring culture, FCPS must revise its leave policies that have resulted in inconsistent discretion for supervisors when it comes to approval. FCPS leadership mentioned that this work of revising the regulation is already underway since it is linked to our calendar, resulting in a discussion of the timeline for the revisions and a desire for alignment between policy and regulation. Board members also requested that leadership look at how principals can be provided necessary resources to allow them to better support staff with the religious accommodations and make these more accessible. The board unanimously approved the request to send this to governance. The second forum topic was presented by Dr. Anderson and myself and requested the board direct superintendent to create a regulation for unstructured outdoor breaks, aka recess, for middle school students. This forum topic was actually introduced by former school board member Sandy Evans in 2018 at the request of parents, including me at the time, for middle schools to provide students with a minimum of 15 minutes of unstructured outdoor break time daily, of course, weather permitting. This break time would not be withheld for any academic performance or behavior issues. And we noted that mental health and academic benefits of these breaks and the overwhelming research to support the need for all students to have them. Many jurisdictions have made these middle school breaks an option, including our neighboring Loudoun County. School board members expressed general support and noticed that this would increase opportunities for students to reconnect with outdoor spaces and be more inclusive of our special education students. There were questions about and wondering if state law was an impediment, and that will be followed up, of course. And we also requested that staff look at what guidance principals could be provided for possible changes in the upcoming school year. This was also approved unanimously. My second report was about SCIP, Fairfax County's Successful Children and Youth Policy Team, met yesterday. Ms. McLaughlin and I attended. There was discussions after the executive meeting in the prior month that the SCIP would maintain its emphasis on school readiness, behavioral health, and community schools expansion. The executive committee also elevated workforce readiness as a fourth area of focus for the SCIP. The goal of Wednesday's meeting was therefore to ensure that for each of these areas of focus, there were clear expectations for future work. The full SCIP heard updates on the accomplishments under each area for the fiscal year 2020 and 21, and I'll actually be providing a very detailed written overview via email on the updates that were provided to us in the meeting, and it will also be posted on the SCIP page of the Fairfax County website for the public to access. We broke out into breakout rooms to discuss the priority areas and then reconvened. On school readiness, some of the key accomplishments this year included implementation of the early development instrument, creation of a dedicated children's fund, and participation in the development of Virginia's unified early childhood system. The groups discussed how to be more equity-focused and inclusive of our families and include them in decision-making for their children, the need for more agile programming so we can expand opportunities, and the need to further explore existing spaces and community partnerships. On behavioral health, discussions were centered around the need to develop a new children's behavioral plan of action and how SCIP can be more focused if we narrowed it down to about 3 to 5 goals, and how we are responding to the COVID-19 crisis. There was also discussion around doing a youth services mapping, taking a pause to look at what we have versus what is needed, affordability gaps, and the need for case management to aid in access to services. The group wanted to ensure that all services were accessible, equitable, and affordable. On community schools, there was a discussion and questions about expansion of schools and a framework to do so, as well as training expansion. It was noted that wraparound services are key to community schools and important, especially during this time. Also shared with us was that Glasgow Middle School has been identified as a community school and funded by communities and schools of Northern Virginia. And while Ms. McLaughlin and I had not heard of this before, we have asked staff to provide us and you with an update on Glasgow. On workforce readiness, there was a discussion around barriers to employment opportunities for some students, and that many of these students are male English language learners. Dr. Presidio introduced the work that FCPS has done in closing the gaps, and welcomed conversations about how to continue improvement in a strategic, intentional manner. The SCIP has been asked by the county to help lead My Brother's Keeper Challenge, an initiative started by President Obama to address persistent opportunity gaps for boys and young men of color. There haven't been any detailed conversations or discussions at the Board of Supervisors level yet, and this is really just the beginning of a conversation of how SCIP could be involved. But it was stressed that any involvement should be data-driven and not stray from the established focus areas of the SCIP committee. It was noted by Ms. McLaughlin that our board should have a more in-depth introduction to this new initiative as we consider involvement. The Executive Committee of SCIP will be meeting in May, and I encourage anyone with questions to reach out to Ms. McLaughlin or myself. And I see you want to add something, Ms. McLaughlin. Go ahead.
Just briefly, that, yeah, we were informed during that meeting that Glasgow actually was named a community school back in 2019, so even before COVID. And so this it runs a pattern, Dr. Brabrand, that when Ms. Fairfax and I were on the SCIP, we didn't know about Sandburg and Mount Vernon Woods being selected. And so I really would encourage your team to please let the board know. I recognize that this is a joint venture. I recognize that it typically comes from outside funding sources, but it's difficult to be a board member on this joint task force. And this is now not only those three, but we also found out in the meeting that Hutchinson Elementary and Herndon Middle School are now next in line for community schools. And I'm a massive champion for the community schools and been doing that for gosh, I think 8 years now. So I'm thrilled about it, but I would really like for the board to be viewed as an important body to just know when this is happening. And so I don't think anybody did anything intentionally, but it's just a pattern that just keeps happening, and I'd like to see us not be in that situation.
Dr. Brabrand, please go ahead.
Thanks, Ms. McLaughlin. And, I will look into it. I will tell you that I have had staff check that we did do a Brabrand briefing about it. I'll have to go back and pull when that was. Again, we're talking well over now, almost 2 years ago. But we need to obviously continue to be sure that we're communicating this out. And I also think around this time we may have been having a transition on our folks who were helping manage that at the senior executive level, our chief equity officer, and we were in transition, I believe. But again, we'll go back. I do believe we did put something in a Brabrand briefing. And as you said, it's exciting work, but we need to be sure we're keeping the board in tune with it. And I'm glad that SCIP is really getting a chance to sort of come back now in this pandemic and re-talk across county and school lines, because the whole idea here is community partnerships can really help deepen the work of our schools and give even kids more rich opportunities. So we'll work on the communication, and sorry about that part, and thanks for sharing it with me this evening.
That's okay. I just want to be clear, though, because I'm not saying you didn't try. It's just I would then put to my colleagues, community schools are something that Fairfax County is more than a decade behind Montgomery County. We know it's one of the best ways to get vital services into communities in need. And so I really would prefer it not being a Brabrand briefing, but that it's actually, when I think about the number of presentations we get, nothing could be more vital than this system and this board being actively engaged, knowledgeable, and understanding of why community schools matter. So just maybe something you guys can talk about in chairs, but I think we need to elevate the importance of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin and Dr. Brabrand. If I can just kind of plug in as the magisterial district member who represents Glasgow, I would love to have access to that old Brabrand briefing because I would like to be able to be supportive in that effort. Our next presenter to speak about CIP will return back to Ms. Cohen.
Thank you so much. Earlier today, Ms. Omesh and myself met with our Board of Supervisors colleagues, Supervisors Faust and Smith, on our joint CIP committee. We are making great progress towards, I think, a truly unified vision of facilities in both our counties and our schools. We did agree that we're going to increase the frequency of our meetings so that we're prepared to bring recommendations for the FY23 budget. We're also looking forward to, and I'm throwing this in your lap here at the dais, Dr. Anderson, but looking forward to scheduling a joint retreat with both boards in the coming months where we can share the work from this committee.
I am on it. Thank you, ma'am, for that work. Now we are up to item 9.01, board matters. I will invite I'm so sorry, did I miss?
Yeah, if I can just add a clarification, it was stated that Carl Sandburg Middle School was a community school. It is not. It's actually Walt Whitman is the community school. So just so that the community knows that it is one of the two, not the other.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett Sanders, for that clarification. And I apologize, I keep missing your hand today. Oh, I think it's the color. I'm missing it, so I apologize. We are up to board matters. I will be inviting our colleagues 3 at a time to provide any information they'd like for the community to hear. And I will not be introducing each single person, just the groups. So please just be on the lookout. We will start with Mr. Frisch, Ms. Dernak-Kofax, and Ms. Keys-Gamara. Mr. Frisch, Ms. Dernak-Kofax, and Ms. Keys-Gamara.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Over the past few weeks, I've had the opportunity to visit several schools, including Stenwood Elementary, Oakton Elementary, Mantua Elementary, Pine Springs Elementary, Luther Jackson Middle School, where we are right now, Kilmer Middle, Oakton High with my colleague Stella Pekarsky, and Falls Church High as well. I've enjoyed talking with our principals, with our teachers and staff and students, and hearing their thoughts about our return to in-person learning, their successes, and how they are addressing the challenges as well. On Monday, I joined about 85 of our teachers and staff for professional development with Cultural Proficiency Module 5, led by Tara Hewen, an FCPS educational specialist for the Equity and Culturally Responsiveness team in the FCPS Office of Professional Learning and Family Engagement. We discussed privilege, power, bias, and a number of other issues. It was a phenomenal session, and I strongly encourage my colleagues to sign up at the next opportunity. That's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the many people who come out and speak to us directly, as well as those who write us letters on all of the issues that are before our board. It is a privilege to serve the Lee District and more broadly Fairfax County as a school board member, and it is a responsibility that I do not take lightly. This has been particularly true this year with respect to my decisions on how best to manage our schools with my colleagues during the COVID pandemic. In my district, depending on the school, about 1/3 to 1/2 of our families have chosen in-person learning. The other 1/2 to 2/3 have chosen to remain virtual. For those I've spoken to or who have spoken to their teachers or administrators, they have chosen to stay virtual for various reasons. Some because they have personally seen the devastating reality associated with COVID. They may have experienced death of family members or friends. They know someone experiencing the devastating long-term effects of COVID survivors. Or they are afraid that their students getting COVID and being asymptomatic carriers and bringing it home to elderly or immune-compromised family members. I cannot state more plainly or more clearly. These are the reasons I, as one board member, have been so cautious in returning children in person. No one wanted COVID. We all want students back in school. We all want to be back to normal. But for the past year, COVID has been in charge, a global pandemic that has killed 573,819 in the U.S. as of today. I appreciate that some individuals' tolerance of risk is higher than others, but please do not assume unethical intentions. The health and safety of our students, staff, and families has always been a top priority. It has been because we care, because we wanted to keep you safe until we believed the risk was lower based upon science and data. And now with revised guidelines and a growing vaccinated population, this is beginning to happen. If you have been fortunate enough not to be touched personally by COVID, if you do not know a friend or a relative who has died from COVID, please consider yourself blessed. Not all of us have been so lucky. The decisions we've made are not because we didn't care. It's truly the opposite. It's because we do care, and we care very deeply.
Thank you. I wanted to start off by acknowledging that April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I am so grateful to our community that has been such an integral part of making sure that our children are safe, our teachers and staff members and leaders, as well as our families working together. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart, as I have dedicated much of my legal career to protecting children. And so I did want to acknowledge this, as well as to give the phone number for the child abuse hotline, which is 703-324-7400, which is the number in Fairfax County. Now, on a personal note, I wanted to thank my colleagues, members of the community, staff members, FCPS, for all the cards and flowers and texts and phone calls, an expression of condolences on the recent passing of my dad. This has been a very difficult time for my family, and your thoughts and prayers mean a lot to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Our next three speakers, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, and Ms. Tolan. Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, and Ms. Tolan.
Thank you. I just want to tell Dr. Brabrand I've really appreciated your principals being so welcoming as we board members go to visit our schools and our districts, and I continue to have those scheduled through the month of April. It's been very helpful to listen and hear about what has been going so well as we've welcomed students back into our schools, what challenges they may face, and how that helps us as a board work with you. I also want to say that seeing the smiles through the masks, you can see a child's eyes just light up when you ask them what it's like to be back in person. And bar none, they all say how much they're loving it. And it's really exciting to see that after coming through this pandemic, that we are making those steps to bring that joy and light back into the kids' eyes. I also want to, I guess, add a little bit to what Ms. Koufax said, because I've said this before, maybe a month or so ago. As a body, the school board, we individually respect each other very much. We recognize that we bring diverse perspectives, and that's how you hopefully arrive at your best decision making. And while we will not always agree, one thing I know for certain is that every one of us, all 12 of us, along with our superintendent's team, care deeply about every single child and about our staff. And so when there are presumptions that our actions are hurting one stakeholder group or another stakeholder group, it's not helpful to our community trying to come through this pandemic together. So I absolutely encourage everyone to continue to share their thoughts, but to consider doing it in a way that we model for our children what it means to have respectful exchanges of ideas and concerns, but it doesn't necessitate attacking people for whatever they presumed motives or intentions. It's not productive. And I hope that when people, again, look at how we 12 talk and speak to one another, and how we also, engage in asking the hard questions, we are also trying to model mutual respect for one another. And we're not always perfect. I know I'm not, but it is certainly a goal. And so I would ask for that. And then finally, I would just say for anyone who's watching tonight's meeting, as Dr. Brabrand noted, his team is working very hard that we can bring back as many students as possible by April 20th for 4 days a week. And that will vary building by building. But I also hope, and this is my personal plea to every principal in this school system, if you are struggling to meet that goal of 4 days a week, please reach out to region offices, reach out to our superintendent and deputy superintendent. I'm concerned that I'm getting messages from families that they're being told it's going to be too hard to handle lunch. And so they're not going to be able to meet that 4 days. And that is, I think, unfortunately creating anxiety in our families as we want to give grace to come through these next 2 weeks and how we transition and expand opportunities in learning. So I would just say that, again, we really are all in this together, but in order to do that, we have to be able to lean on one another, and we have to let each other know where challenges are and look for the solutions at every turn. So I thank my colleagues for the indulgences as I shared my remarks tonight.
Thank you. I will try to be brief. It's been a great month or so being able to go into classes and see our students in the buildings and smiling and the teachers engaging and hearing from them how great it feels to be back in the building, but also to see the interactions the teachers still have with our virtual students. And it's been really great to sit in on the flip side in the virtual classrooms, in these concurrent classrooms, and see that engagement going on. And I challenge us as we are bringing more students into the building to keep the student perspective in the center of that, whether they're virtual students or in-person students, and keep finding ways for the students to connect with each other and with their school community so we can rebuild and re-engage our school communities to be as strong as they are, and to find ways to bring the fun into school, and continue to do that, whether it's in person or in virtual. Keep finding ways to find the fun, because if we take what's happened in COVID and the deep difficulties and the heaviness of that, we have to acknowledge that. But if we let that drive out the fun, the joy that we can still find in life and in school, that is how we have a disengaged and fractured community. So I hope we can still, despite the heaviness of this year, find the joy and keep the student perspective. I want to say I appreciate my colleagues and our leadership team and the words standing strong in support of our Asian American students and staff. As someone who is Asian American, I've heard certain words in my own life towards myself and implicit biases. And words do matter, as we see, and words lead to actions that can hurt. So I appreciate the strong support. And I want to just acknowledge it is both Autism Acceptance Month and Military Child Celebration Month, and we have a large military family. I have a large military family contingent in my neighborhood, and I know how resilient our military children are, so I wanted to stop and recognize that. And I wanted to say for Autism Acceptance Month, I am glad we've gone from awareness to acceptance, but I hope the next step is to go to redefining diversity to include the lived norms of those with autism as part of diversity, so we no longer have Autism Acceptance Month, but we just celebrate autism as part of diversity. So I am glad to see that additional step. And I just wanted to share a couple really cool things. I met with a girls' Boy Scouts of America troop recently, and I was very impressed at the girls' very thoughtful questions. But my favorite question was when they asked me, what was my most impactful class I took in high school? And my answer, hands down, without hesitation, was theater. Because that is the class where I learned all the soft skills and portrait graduate skills that really have led to me to be successful in college, in law school, and in my career. And I can't tell you a single thing about biology, but I can tell you that I can rock in an interview thanks to my theater class. So that was my answer to the Girl Scouts. And I wanted to end with one thing that, to pick up from my colleague said about the tone and the divisiveness. We all have the best interests of our school system and our community in mind, whether we agree on the path forward or not. And I wanted to say that recently I sat and listened to two groups of students who had felt very hurt by each other's actions and words. And I sat and I listened to them, the one group that felt hurt, reach out to the other group being very open to listening to the first group that was hurt. And the two of them, in very raw, open, honest, and curious conversations, come to a place where they found a compromise and moved forward as friends. And I sat and I told those students that they were real models for what the rest of us could and should be. So with everything that our students have gone through this year, I am so impressed with the lessons they have learned. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to announce, am I happy to announce that we have a new principal for Spring Hill Elementary School. Maria Eck is coming to us in the summer when she finishes her work at Justice High School. A huge thank you to Mr. Sal Rivera, our interim principal, that is willing to stay at Spring Hill Elementary School until she's available. During this month of the Military Child, I want to highlight the work I saw firsthand while working for FCPS the creative and innovative STEM and environmental education programs at Fort Belvoir Elementary School. The DoD environmental goals and ethic make Fort Belvoir a wonderful partner for the FCPS Get to Green program. In addition, the military call to service has Fort Belvoir students sharing their incredible work with students across the region. I'm really excited for the opportunity we are giving more of our students to have 4 days in our school buildings. I know many of our students and families need that, and I am happy we are working to provide this. I do, however, want to recognize the Herculean task we are asking of our school-based staff to make this happen. Our principals are planning details for classrooms, for bus rides, for lunch service, and more, while they're fielding many questions from our families. Our technology specialists are installing and moving equipment from room to room. Our teachers are reformatting lessons and learning groups in order to have almost 50% of our students still in virtual learning, and to bring in some for 4 days and some for 2 days. We are asking our teachers to manage classrooms that have some number of in-person students Tuesday and Wednesday, some other number Thursday and Friday, some virtual all of those days, some virtual some of those days. It's really hard and it's exhausting. But our teachers are amazing and they're stepping up to do it. I have been visiting concurrent classrooms the past weeks to see what the student experience is in those rooms. It has been varied, but what is consistent is the energy of the teacher always shines through. They use classroom management tools to keep in-class and at-home students engaged, and they are keeping students learning even as we move into the 4th quarter of this learning. I've learned a lot of algebra, calculus, science, poetry analysis, and more. I did struggle a little bit, I admit, with French 5, but that was my problem, not the teacher. So to our teachers in particular, thank you for offering our students so many needed opportunities and for being creative as we move forward and transition even further. In addition, I want to congratulate our students for their continued successes. Even in this unusual year, our students are competing regionally and nationally for awards and coming out on top. Just this past week, we announced DECA first place winners from McLean High School, Jackson Chadwick and Jay Shin in marketing management. Congratulations to McLean High School sophomore Ethan Zhao for qualifying for the United States of America Mathematics Olympiad for the 2nd year in a row. We have National Scholastic Writing and Art winners in Janesville, gold medalists from McLean High School, Ellen Pan and Sarah Bowers, and Aaron King. And from TJ, Allison Wan has 2 gold medals and Best in Grade award. And McLean High School student Marina Q has a silver award. And TJ students Eileen Zhao and Mulan Pan also have silver awards. And not to be outdone, our Dranesville staff, McLean High School, Paul Stansbury, Director of Student Services, has been named Region 2 Outstanding School-Based Leader, and Melissa Dulick has been named as the Region 2 Outstanding New Teacher. Congratulations to all of you. We're proud of you in Dranesville. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tolan. Our next set of speakers, Ms. Marin, Ms. Cohen, and Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Ms. Marin, Ms. Cohen, and Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, I'm certainly aware of the different experiences with availability of in-person learning in schools in Hunter Mill. The principal is making determinations on what can be offered based on the very finite limit of space and staffing. But I understand the frustration that this raises for some families who aren't receiving an option to increase to 4 days. And I acknowledge the extra work that these additional changes are placing on our teachers and staff. In my role, I continue trying to provide information to constituents as best as possible so they can make the decisions needed to best support their families in these circumstances. I do want to speak briefly to instances and allegations of racism that have been that we've heard about lately regarding our football program at FCPS, and I want to share thoughts and aspects that I'm observing and considering as I've interacted with involved parties, my board colleagues, and FCPS staff to identify the responsibilities that FCPS has to attack racism. As a school division that is public and a place of community gathering and employment, that we demand respect of all individuals in our schools and community. As an educational institution, we must nurture children, whether they're 7 or 17, on how to coexist in society and how to be tolerant, but even better, how to be accepting and respectful of others. Having a commitment to doing the work to eradicate racism in our schools through many approaches, which includes fortifying our staff to be anti-racist, swiftly identifying situations where overt racist behaviors occur and being open with the community when this happens, and implementing clear consequences and learning opportunities when egregious behavior occurs. Once again, this is an instance where what happens in public schools is not the only factor contributing to some students' comfort with using racial slurs and bigoted language. The solutions that FCPS is attempting may not be all-inclusive or perfect yet, but the solutions are not only FCPS's alone to impart. Families, we need your help. We need to end racism in our schools and to face the hard truth and educate our children that hate and bigotry of any person has no place here. On that note, I am planning an upcoming community meeting about racism and bias in curriculum. This is leading off of the state's work to update our social studies standards, and I welcome Hunter Mill residents and others to join in the conversation so that we can contribute more comments to the state and to FCPS on how to make our curriculum more anti-racist. So you can look on my webpage on the official FCPS site to sign up for my newsletter, and it'll be in there. I did have a student town hall before spring break, and while I provided an update, I was most glad to hear from students on topics that included their experiences on online learning and mental health needs, and other topics like bringing in therapy dogs to schools to help with mental health and talking about student government opportunities. I am very excited about the graduation dates. I've put some on my calendar. I hope it'll all work out that I can attend. I know space will be limited, but it's so exciting to know that we will have in-person ceremonies this year. I did just want to shout out to two particular people or organizations. One is a group called Vienna Foodies, and I'm wearing their mask this evening, which side? This is a group that has grown exponentially during COVID. What started as a way to convene lovers of food locally grew into a movement in Vienna of 12,000 people on a Facebook page headed by a woman named Lydia Russo and her friends, which has done tremendous work to get food to food insecure families, to support our local businesses in Vienna that are owned by FCPS families, and it's really fostering goodwill around the community and doing fundraisers and engaging other groups like Rustic Love Vienna. And so if you're driving around and you see a heart sign or magnet, know that that's an expression of trying to garner goodwill and keep our economy afloat, keep our family businesses running, and it's just really a beacon of goodwill in the community. So thank you to Vienna Foodies. And also I wanted to congratulate our first grade student who is the newly published artist in FCPS, Sarah Saravan of McNair Lower Elementary won the Virginia Lottery's annual Thank a Teacher art contest. She was one of 3 students statewide that won, and her art will be featured on thank you cards that are going to be sent all over the state for thanking a teacher in the weeks ahead. So, and finally, a happy Ramadan Mubarak to those observing in the weeks ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I will continue the train of thanking our schools for having us and supporting our students. I got to go to Liberty Middle School, South County High School, Silverbrook Elementary School, and West Springfield Elementary School in the last couple of weeks. And I'm just so appreciative of everything that you all are doing to support our students and everything that our staff is just doing, going above and beyond to try to make everything work in a world that just doesn't feel like that is very easy right now. I also just wanted to remind everyone that today is Yom HaShoah, which is our Holocaust Remembrance Day. Elie Wiesel said, "For the dead and the living, we must bear witness." Today we mourn the 6 million Jews and millions of others who were LGBTQ, disabled, Roma, and Sinti. And as we all say every year, never forget, never again.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen, and if I can pick up on your very eloquent comments about Holocaust Remembrance Day, I want to encourage all of our families to actually have conversations about the Holocaust Remembrance Day and the importance of discussing the impact of hate speech and hatred based on somebody's religious affiliation, the color of their skin, the person that they love, and how that if we don't talk about it and talk about the importance of respecting and including people, then we have the risk of repeating the horrors of the Holocaust. So please, I encourage people to have that conversation at home. Secondly, I wanted to talk a little bit about our National Library Month, and that we can't really talk about the importance of National Library Month without talking about the importance of literacy. And I wanted to thank the NAACP for their letter this week about the importance of having a structured approach to literacy in our schools and the importance for Fairfax County to review its practices of literacy. And I look forward to having a continued conversation, Dr. Brabrand, with you and your leadership team about that work. Third, I wanted to follow up on the discussions regarding SCIPT and the importance of workforce development because of the activities of the CTE Advisory Committee, for which I am the liaison. And I wanted to share with this board and with the community the great successes of our students that have just been winning awards across the state and the nation over the past month in a wide variety of subjects. And that includes the Cyber Patriot teams from TJ and Woodson that placed in the top 10 in the nation for high school teams in cyber security. There was also 3 teams from Carson Middle School that swept the state finals in cybersecurity. We also had 56 students from the Chantilly Academy, the Falls Church Academy, West Potomac Academy, all participating in the health and medical sciences state competition, and all placing in that competition. So it just shows that even in this very difficult time of COVID, that our students are resilient and focused on doing innovative, cool things in the area of CTE, and we should be encouraging them, and I'm just so excited to see where else they'll go with these programs. I want to give a heads up on April 23rd. It's going to be a very big day. We have the Real Food for Kids. We'll be announcing via Facebook Live the winners of that competition, and we will also be having the rededication of the John R. Lewis High School that evening, and so I'm really looking forward to that. I also understand that there is the SEAS Environmental Earth Day Power Session on that day as well, and I hope Ms. Tolan can give more details on that, since this is really something that it's on my calendar, but I don't know enough, so I'm going to let you pick that one up. And I'm also going to encourage people, once again following up on SCIP, about the importance of Head Start. And the Head Start enrollment is ongoing as we speak, and there are vacancies. So please, if you know children that could benefit from Head Start, encourage their families to enroll. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Our next 3 speakers will be Ms. Omesh, Ms. Pekarsky, and myself. Ms. Omesh.
Thank you. This past Monday, I was thrilled to join Nathan, our student representative, on our biweekly stream, along with Dr. Williams, our Chief Equity Officer, and school community leaders, about challenges and opportunities that we can expect to face after this year. I've been really excited to see our students returning to school and our staff working really hard to have them feel welcome and to make sure we're fulfilling all the safety protocols to bring them back, and seeing the smiles on their faces has really been a joy. In our conversation this past Monday, we did try to keep it real, and I want us to continue being alert to the intentional work that continues to be necessary to support our students who may have faced challenges as we look ahead, whether that be in academic challenges or in mental health supports. Which brings me to a huge shout out. I'm really proud of our student mental health working group that has been developing solutions for some of the challenges that students have been going through and what they're facing ahead. We've been working with staff and are really excited to present some of those soon, so stay tuned for that. Also, a huge shout out to all the seniors, many of whom have incredible stories of overcoming adversity this past year and are just now solidifying exciting paths ahead with all their college acceptances or even paths towards technical and trade opportunities or perhaps even gap year programs. I did want to also, especially because of the date tomorrow being the commemoration of the end of the Civil War, and then this month being the anniversary of the Civil Rights Act in this country, acknowledge and echo some of Ms. Marin's thoughts about what we've been hearing, just this past week with Robinson, Marshall before that, and on of unacceptable stories that we're hearing. And at some point, we have to make the decision to believe those students who come forward, to understand their powerful voices, and to stand in solidarity together on the side of what we know to be justice moving forward for our communities. So I want to make sure that as a division, we continue to think about ways that we're going to be very serious about weeding out these challenges and hopefully raising a generation that has a different mindset and mentality. I am really excited about an effort I'm working on with some students and actually some conversations with colleagues and staff to develop accountability mechanisms. It's not enough for us to think that these things are just going to go away because we condemn them, but we really have to be intentional about incentivizing and disincentivizing the behaviors that we expect in our division. So I look forward to that intentional work and encourage and urge any of my colleagues who are interested in joining me on that to be in touch, and I look forward to further collaborating with all of you on that. And finally, I did want to wish everybody a blessed Ramadan. It's going to be a month of reflection. There's a lot to think about after this year, but hopefully everyone is able to come together as a family starting next Tuesday.
Thank you. I did want to thank Oakton High School for such a welcoming visit with Mr. Frisch that we had, I guess, about a week and a half ago. It was nice to see kids being kids and in classrooms and utilizing outdoor spaces. It really was a wonderful reminder of how things were and how we will continue to try to get back to normal, as much normal as possible. I also had a wonderful visit with the Greenbrier West PTA, where I was a parent at that school for a decade, so it was nice to see old friends, to see the new administration and everything that was happening over there, and to speak with parents, and I thank them for that invitation. I also had the opportunity to meet with Capanova, which is a newer group of Asian American parents and community members who have really come together in the last few months out of concern of where we are as a community, as a society, and wanted to have a voice and wanted to share their experiences and wanted to really get involved in a more intentional manner in our school system and have their voices heard and their stories told. So I look forward to more conversations and more work that we have to do in the areas that some of my colleagues have brought tonight. And that's it. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pekarsky. I will try to be very brief, as I know I stand between us and going home. I do want to say I am really encouraged and heartened by the news as of late. Our students returning back to school, both for 2 days, and the expansion. My personal child comes home with that joy each and every day that he is in school. So I'm really looking forward to that expansion so he can go all 4 of those days. The graduation news, I am so excited, not just for all of our families in Fairfax County who will have the opportunity to really see their students in a more traditional manner, but also for our board members here. I know it was very hard last year when we had to watch Ms. Pekarski not participate in that. And so for this year, I'm glad that we'll have some opportunities for Ms. Sizemore-Heiser and you as well, Dr. Braybrand. I do want to say, very excited for Ms. Eck, who is moving on to Drainsville, but we are very much saddened that she's not going to be part of the Mason District family. Not to end on a low note, but this causes some concern for me, Dr. Braybrand, that I'd like for us to kind of dig into. I think of all of the board members here in my year that I've been on this board, I have probably sat through 5, 6 new principal appointments with 2 more coming. That bears some discussion, that bears some address. It's an issue. Our community deserves a little bit more continuity. And so I need for us to dig very deeply and to determine how to make that happen. I will end there. I want to say thank you all to everyone who participated. Thank you to my colleagues and to staff for the presentations. And have a good night all. We are adjourned.